Asteroid of fear.
Right.
It can be a clip,
Yeah, no,
because
we're good.
that's always one of those things. I'm always like, man, it can happen. But yeah, I'm telling you, the older I get, the harder, the slower everything seems to become. Um, Getting up is like its own thing. I almost have to get up early just to get moving. And so I'm kind of
Yeah.
ready to get off of what I call like the four Advil and a coffee wake up.
Yep.
I can get, not that there's any, sometimes you need that regiment, but it would be nice to not have to have it.
Well, I think the longer that you go into this routine of waking up early, being active, stuff like that, I think it almost weans itself off, you know. I think that anyway.
Yeah,
But
I wish, man. I don't know. I think I go through periods. Um, and maybe it's the periods of growth, when your body's actually doing something that why you feel all maybe more aches and pains. And then I always think there's some maybe like with a transition of kind of like the whatever you want to call it, like seasons, like
sure.
just like we have the seasons. I think that as winter comes along, your body kind of thaws out and operates differently in the mornings. And we still haven't settled into proper spring, or uh, I don't know what you want to call it, but we're still getting that. Texas is
Where are you?
still
You're in Texas?
Texas.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're still getting that cold morning, warm afternoon kind of bit. Here lately, maybe this week, it's been like in the upper 60s, but we did have like where it was doing this like upper 60s in the morning, 80s, and then all of a sudden it wants to go like 40s and 80s.
Sure.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like, man, like make up your mind already. Like, have we
Yeah.
left winter or not? And but I think our bodies are kind of similar in that, it can't really get a grip until the seasons are there, like some stability, because I'm certain all that impacts you. I mean, surely you got to
Oh,
know.
sure. Yeah, I think that maybe I've hacked that or something because with working in Alaska where I did, where I am now at least
Yeah.
too is, going from the seasons up there because I'm as far north in Alaska as you can go. So I'm in Prudhoe Bay, and you're there, and it's still right now it's still probably below zero,
Holy
and
cow.
or maybe right about it. Like when I was there for my last 3 weeks, it was kind of flirting above and below. It would go back and forth, but I looked the other day and it was like -9. So, and right now it's 46 in Michigan. So going from that, extreme back and forth, and even in the winter time, it gets really cold up there. And the coldest I've ever worked in with the wind chill was -92. And so like going from that to whatever it is here, in the winter, it could be
Yeah.
30 above, or 20 above, something like, um, I don't know, maybe I've just kind of never experienced that like seasonal transition with my body just because I haven't really had the opportunity to,
Yeah.
or maybe I'm not quite in tune with myself at that level just because going back and forth, like it's such a shock to your body on that.
That's wild. All right. Well, and we'll talk more about that. Well, let's get it
Hmm.
started. So here we
Yeah.
go. Um, Everybody, all the listeners, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And on today's episode, I got with me Michael Bryan. And so, kind of like some of my initial interviews that started off on this podcast, we're circling back around. I had a little 6 month hiatus where I didn't interview anybody because I was on a work project. And now that I'm back, I'm sifting through Podmatch and circling back to some of the TikTok people I had met and wanted to interview. And I've been following Michael for about a year or more than a year. And so that's kind of how we connected. And I'll get into why I want to interview him and all that. But essentially, I started off with the podcast and TikTok and going through there, and Michael was having coffee at a Michigan breakfast spot, and my wife's family is from Michigan, and we had been to Sheboygan like a summer or two before, and I super enjoyed it. Michigan's one of these places I didn't know if I would like. Ended up falling in love with it, and I was like, oh, and everybody's really nice there, and I was like, okay, let's see what this guy's about. And so I ended up, just tuning in, and I just liked what you were about. You were just about kind of having conversation, making connections. And at that time, and we'll get into all this through story, but at that time, I think you weren't necessarily working in Alaska, but you were doing something with kind of revamping buses, travel buses, school buses
Yeah.
into livable type things. And as a podcaster who wants one of those one day, that certainly piqued my interest. But then, of course, as the year has gone by and I've watched you evolve, you're a avid outdoorsman. You love fishing and hunting. And, of course, that's no secret. A lot of people in Michigan love to do that. And that's a
Right.
great place to be able to do that. You're also into photography. And I wrote down this thing. I said, there's like seeing some of your photographs of Ohio. Ohio's not necessarily a place I think people would associate with some of the beauty that I've seen in some of your photographs. People think of city and different things, and I go, so either Ohio has some beautiful places or he's a really good photographer or both.
No, we'll go with Ohio. It really is a beautiful place. I coming from Michigan, there's like a um
A rivalry?
yeah, yeah,
The
like it's like
football?
it's actually it's like such a like ingrained stigma. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you're from Michigan, you're just not allowed to like Ohio. Like it's just like that's just it. Even I'm not even a sports guy. I could give two craps
Yeah.
about sports. Like I'm not one to follow any team or even have the mental aptitude to sit and watch a game for the most part. But like just knowing that there's that rivalry there has always been there. And I had to do a job in Columbus, and just kind of being the type that I am, I can't just sit in a hotel after work. I have to
Yeah.
like explore and see what's out there and everything. And then I looked around and was asking people there, and I was like an hour away from Logan, which is where Hocking Hills is. And so I just was like, I gotta go. And that place is magical, and I would get there right at daybreak and do like a sunrise hike through these waterfalls and stuff like that. So you're alone in these places. There's not like the energy from other people to impact you or anything like that. And it was just like it was a really soulful feeling. It was just something to be in tune like that and in touch with
Mm-hmm.
nature and alone. It was great. And at that time I just had my camera. Like I didn't even have, or sorry, not like my phone. I didn't have a camera yet,
Oh,
and
wow.
so I was taking just phone photographs and thinking that I was, doing great. And then I ended up getting my camera and going back there, and I was like, like I don't even want to look at my phone photographs anymore. But I do remember the very first time you came into my live. Only from the fact a little bit of what you had spoke about, but also the name of like your tag, the Man of the House podcast, like that to me, like for whatever it was at that time, whatever I was talking about or anything like that, it was just like it was just like, damn, dude, I love that name. And so like that was like an immediate connection on that level, and I just always loved that.
Well, and it's funny because the origin story is it's kind of like a play on Men of the Waffle House. One of my things to do, especially when we're traveling as a family, as I'm the early riser, I get up and I go to the Waffle House and I sit at the counter of the bar and because booths are for two or more, similar to the way you were having coffee. And it's really kind of like the way you were on TikTok Live. I sit there and I go, well, what's the story of the person to the right of me? What's the story to the man of left of me? Are they fathers like me? Are they getting some quiet time? Are they traveling and this is their breakfast? What's the scoop? And
Yeah.
so conceptually, very similar. And, lastly, one of the big things that's important to me as I embarked on this journey of starting the podcast, kind of taking this chance on myself, not going back to corporate healthcare, which is what I did and got laid off from. Um, was being a father, and being a father now, because I always had this idea that, oh, I would go through like manager, director, VP, and when my daughter was able to go to college, I would be in a position to fly in, work from home, financially okay, yada yada. When I got laid off during the pandemic, I realized the time to be the father I wanted to be was now while she's here, regardless of the situation. And she was one that encouraged me to start a podcast. And so I do Uber, I've done live in health caregiving, and just odd things, anything that allows me to kind of be where I need to be when I need to be there and where I
Allows your
want to
time.
be. Yes.
Yeah.
And so you're very similar. And that was one of the things that resonated hugely with me. And especially over the past year, anybody that I think would follow you or kind of know you through following you would understand that fatherhood is a huge, important piece of you, who you are,
Yeah.
what you're about, maybe how your life is designed and your ideas around that. And that was kind of another thing because I was sitting there thinking last night coming into this interview, I was like, um, I'm 48. You're in your what, young 40s?
I'm 42. Yeah.
Right. So we have a few years apart, but I think just in general, whether it's I'm looking for it, whether it's because I'm making the conscious decision, I see it more and identify with it more. But I feel like the world is just asking more of men and um, what they want us to be as fathers, and um, more is expected of us. It's not just enough to go and earn a paycheck and come home like in a traditional marriage, maybe like your parents did. And we just know so much more about,
Right.
I think, maybe the way, you know, I never wanted for anything. My parents were great providers, but there's just things they didn't know and things I think that were missed that might have led to a better emotional upbringing. And I
Yep.
think we're in this generation of trying to close those gaps. It's not the
Yeah.
provision thing, it's the being present thing. And you're,
100. I agree with that. Yeah.
yeah. So,
I think we're in a weird place of like a society transformation of, when we were kids, on large part, moms were still kind of in the household.
mm-hmm,
And then through growing up and everything, there was this whether you want to call it the feminist movement or whatever however, I don't know what term you want to put on it or anything like that, but like this woman empowerment to get them, like to to have a life of their own and all of this, which is great. And I think that that's I support that fully in all women. But I think it was kind of cloaked in a very different way. They portrayed it as, well, female empowerment, but really all that did was remove the woman from the household and double
and
the
it
tax
well, and
base.
inequality too.
Right. Yes, and I still think that that's a very important part of it. But in my opinion, the real reason for it was to remove them from the home and double the tax base. They were put them to
Oh
work,
yeah.
and the government generated tax income, tax revenue off of their backs. And so and I've said this before on my lives, and it's a largely unpopular opinion, but they were
Hmm.
duped.
Yeah.
They were duped in that sense, and it's not no fault of their own. Like they packaged it and made it a really nice sounding thing, and
Well, and the
um
family gets duped in the end. The family
completely.
unit.
One
I
one
mean,
hundred percent.
I've had interviews with like other men, this dude Jason Lang from Evolutionary Men, and as the father of three daughters, I 100% agree with you in terms of I support it. I'm glad they can be whatever they want and be CEOs and all that. However, you know, and now we're free to do this, because I'm kind of like a stay-at-home dad doing odd jobs, being a
Hmm.
podcaster. And that's looked at weirdly in a way, societal's view, but we had discussed, hey, now we're in this time with women can be CEOs, I can be a stay-at-home dad, podcaster, odd jobber, that you can have your family dynamic unit, whatever iteration that provides the most love, stability, security for the children is what you want to have, and you're free to
Right.
actually have it now. But, would we necessarily even need it if, like you said, maybe we hadn't been sold a bill of goods that maybe just wasn't true,
Right.
where the family unit was no longer kind of important. I mean,
Yeah.
you sacrifice one thing for the other. I mean, we give women a lot of equality and all this stuff, but now, what we know psychologically, attachment styles, parent, needing their parents during certain times and all that, it it can make a mess 20 or 30 years down the road.
Agree. I did a podcast with my grandmother last year or the year before, early last year.
Hmm.
And part of that podcast I had asked her what her opinion of, women in the workforce was and how she viewed it and all of that. Because she was in the workforce, um and I just, I wanted her opinion on it. She's 92 now. And I just was like, what's your, how do you view that? And she said, Michael, at that time, we needed to, because that took us from eating butter sandwiches to being able to like have a full meal and, keep the lights on and all of these things. And now it's more to have the second or third vehicle in the driveway or the second home or, and so she views it as, um, it was a necessity. Now it's a luxury or even maybe not maybe luxury isn't quite the right word for it, but, back then it was because they needed it. And now it's just out of
Kind
maybe
of a way
gluttony
to
or
get,
greed,
yeah, a way to get more,
Right, right,
because even if you don't need it, you somehow justify it, because
right.
there's a lot of times I can tell you, like when I got laid off and you break it down to bare bones and you go, I there were times I had to ask myself, well, I have everything I need, okay? So what's the problem? Where's the rub? Where's the friction? You
Yeah.
know? And if all your basic needs are met, then, typically it's some other bill of goods you've been sold of, um, what you think you should be doing, where you think you should be, or how you think it should be, or something. And it could be from something years ago, but let's kind of start from the beginning. You're from Michigan,
Yeah.
um, born and raised.
Yeah, yeah, I was born in Midland, Michigan, and we, at an early age, we had ended up, well, my biological father left when I was like 2,
Hmm.
and my older brother was 5. I think that's about what it was. And there was a short period of time where, my mom was a single mom, did all that, and then my dad, who I know as my dad, he's the only role model that I've ever known. Incredible man, adopted us, early on, took us on as his own, all of that. We all moved out to California to Mountain View for a very brief time, like a year. Um, and I guess I have a little story I can tell about my experience out there. It was my very first interaction with karma. But but yeah, so I was out there. We were out there for a year and moved back to Michigan to a little town Greenville. It's kind of like it was a manufacturing town, pre-NAFTA, it was at least, and farm town also, just a, and I really, growing up, I thought that I just lived like the very stereotypical Midwestern boy childhood of just being like Dennis the Menace, like always into something, running around the neighborhoods. We were, always at the river,
One
always
brother
doing
or how many siblings?
two brothers. I've got an older brother that's 3 years older than me, and he's my full brother, and then I've got a half brother, but I mean, there's no definition like that in our
Right.
family, and so he's 7 years younger, and so that was with my dad and everything, and so my older brother Devin and I, we were not largely together. When we were running around, we had the same friend group for the most part. We had some friends that were,
Yeah, because you get kind of that
segregated apart and
junior
stuff,
high,
but
high school split
right,
with the
right.
3 years and
Yep, yep. And but like in early years, we were always together, and very much stereotypical brothers, like beating on each other, and like all of the things that I think is in a sense necessary in siblings,
yeah,
and so, but at any time when somebody was beating on me, like he was the first person to have my back.
yeah,
So we were, looking back, we were pretty tight, growing up and everything, and um good childhood, what I would say. My parents were, I have to preface this also with like I've had 9 concussions. So like there's a lot of gaps and stuff that I don't necessarily recall, or maybe even experiences that I don't recall fully. But like in my perception of it all, like my parents were great parents for what they were able to do at the time with what they had. And they provided great for us and everything. We always had food on the table, always had clothes, oh, that sort of thing.
right.
But I don't ever recall a time where they were there to kind of connect with us, like what you had said earlier, like on an emotional level. And in my perception, they were absent in the sense of like they allowed us freedom,
Well, and so
like
you don't
to
allow, well,
go.
you don't, well, if you don't get that connection, and this is what I'm learning at 48, is that you don't learn the co-regulation, therefore you'll never learn self-regulation, and until you almost have to, and it
Right.
usually comes out of some sort of, as men, we run ourselves into the ground and use alcohol and abuse ourselves and push our limits and learn our limits.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were like as kids, man, we were hitching rides on trains to go across town. We
Yeah,
were, like literally just like
because this
little
was
assholes,
pre-internet,
really.
right?
Yeah. Oh,
Pre-internet.
yeah.
And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
and
Back
that's
when
kind of
kids were
like
still
you're in that
kids.
age range of, like I'm a Gen X and I don't know exactly where the cutoff is, but I know you're in that, if you're in that pre-internet range, you're kind of like a similar childhood in a small town
Yeah.
in Texas where it's like all day, maybe there's one, I grew up on 12 acres, there's one adult on the 12 acres maybe, and there's five of us that are all cousins and whatnot and
Yeah.
live within a certain triangle and meet up every day and just run
Yeah.
amok.
That was it. That was it. And it was, and looking back, like I couldn't imagine a different childhood. There was a time when I was probably 12 years old fishing down at the river by myself,
Yeah,
and it was like February, it was cold, so I started this little fire just to warm my hands up, and I'm like kind of just like and my son at 12 didn't even know how to start a fire. But I'm like warming my hands up and I look and my rod's going, I've got a fish, so I turn around, I'm like fighting this fish. And as I'm fighting the fish, like I can feel the heat on my back, and I'm like, oh man, it feels good. Like, and I'm just like fighting, fighting. And as I'm like fighting this fish longer, like the heat's getting a little more, but now I'm hearing like crackling. And I was like, oh no. And I turn around and like the whole hillside is on fire,
oh,
like in town. And I'm like, oh shit. And I snap my line and I'm like I run up the hill, and on one side it was a power substation and the other side it was a hill going down to
mm-mm.
the river. And I just remember like running the trail out of there. So like I said, there's like a fence here, a barbed wire fence, and then the hill. And I felt like I was like in Indiana Jones or something, like running the gauntlet like out of there, And I get on top of the dam and I huck my lighter in the river because like I was no dummy. Like I'm not about to have
Yeah,
evidence. And so get out of there. and run home, take everything home. And I just walked right back down there like an idiot, not knowing. And police are down there, fire trucks are down there. I mean, this is probably a 150-yard long hillside at the dam in Greenville, Michigan, and so it's like the whole thing is on fire and they're putting it out and everything. And I walk back down there, same clothes that I had on. And here comes this officer who I end up becoming friends with later in life. But he ends up coming up. He's like, "Do you know anything about this?" I'm like, "No, I don't know anything about this." And he's like, "You sure?" I'm like, "No, I just heard the sirens and thought I'd come down and check it out." And he's like, "All right, well, we had reports of a kid in a green sweater running away from here." Still had the same green sweater on. And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about." And he's just like, "Empty your pockets." And I'm like, okay. Already did that, like, so I like emptied my pockets. I had some lifesavers and, like, who knows what else was in my pocket at that time. But no lighter. And he's just like, "All right, well, if you hear anything about this, you be sure to let us know." And he hands me his card. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I will, like, but just like experiences like that at such a young age
Yeah.
where like and I mean I could probably go on for days about just dumb shit that I did, but
Yeah.
having those times at that age is genuinely like what made me who I am today. And I even push my son Landon to go and do those things. I've told him before, I'm like, "Dude, go start a fire. Like, go out in the woods and start a fire, dude. Like, go and do that. Like, you've got to do dumb shit. Go do something.
Yeah.
Be safe, be smart, but do dumb shit. Like, it's okay. Go jump off a bridge. I don't know. Like,
We used to
go,
do that. We used to jump off into the water, but
yeah,
going camping late at night, like our friends had, everybody kind of had land, so it's like, deciding it when it's completely dark that you're gonna drive a little Ford Ranger to the back of this property and start a fire and pitch a tent and stay up all night as,
yeah.
15, 16-year-old boys. I mean, it was just, we had a similar fire starting incident. I remember running through the field going, "Oh boy," like running away. And it was just, but yeah, go out all day, come back when it's dark. And I often think, the same threats were probably always there. Were we just less aware because of the internet, or now we know, like, hey, don't go to a van with no windows for candy.
Right.
It's not really candy in there.
Well, I actually just I heard something. It was a reel on whatever it was, Instagram or TikTok or something the other day, and the guy actually broke down the statistics and he said actually it's the exact opposite of what we perceive, and that is crime rates have steadily gone down over the last 30 years. So we're actually in a safer world now than what we were when we were young. But I think because of the media,
Yeah,
with spreading, we didn't hear when we were young, we didn't hear what went on. Like for me, I didn't hear what went on in Texas.
right.
We had local news. It was just
Exactly.
whatever went on here, and I think that that's a little bit by design on the media aspect of like they're able to run a little bit of fear into people to for whatever reason, I don't know, but so it's like I didn't hear what went on in Texas. So if a kid was abducted in Texas, we didn't know about it. And so I think now with the news cycle being so with the reach of the news cycle being so
Hmm.
great, it imposes this idea in people that it is of in fact a very dangerous world out there, and it is to a sense, of course, but um, I think keeping children home, allowing children to play their games and everything doesn't help in any way to keep them safer. And if anything, it makes them more naive to what is actually going to be experienced out in life. And when we were young, we had wits about us. We had street smarts to where it's like, oh, like, yeah, no, you don't look good. Like, you don't like, I wouldn't trust that guy, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But the naivety of children these days is they haven't had a fraction of the experiences that we've had to be able to be aware of those sort
Well,
of things.
actually, that you brought up a good point, and I thought about this. It's kind of you um, in is I'm sure some psychologist could break it down and tell me where I'm wrong or right. The internet psychologist will do it. But if you don't have those kinds of person to person interactions, can you in fact then trust your gut, get that feeling,
Yeah.
and if everything is text or chat based, you're not used to it, because I did a solo episode and I was talking about, man, remember back in the day, like, hey, if you wanted to get lucky or hook up with a girl for a night, you're going to talk to her. You're going to ask
Right.
her for her number. You're
Yep.
going to initiate a conversation. And that takes some, man,
Courage.
yeah, I can remember being in the military and you're like, I've done all these things over here. I've jumped out of an airplane before, yet I'm scared to walk up to a girl at a bar and
Right.
ask her for her number. But
Yep.
if you don't have those interactions in person, then it is hard to, I guess, identify stranger danger and in fact
Yep.
trust your gut.
Yeah. I had this conversation with a woman yesterday about gut instinct. And I think we're kind of taught through, even, I think in schooling a lot of like to, in a roundabout way, not to trust your gut. Like, oh, you shouldn't judge people. You shouldn't, don't judge a book by its cover. All of
Well,
these
your gut's
things.
considered part of emotion, and you're typically taught, I mean, even what you read on the internet, what is it like? Trust your plan, not your emotions, or stick to the plan, not your
Right.
emotions.
And I disagree. I think that is one of our senses that's given to us by whatever, whether it be you believe in God or you believe in the universe, whatever it is. Like,
Right.
we're given that for a reason. And over time, we're conditioned to
Ignore it.
forego, yeah, to ignore that feeling, even to the point of where it's like, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings, or I don't want to do this, or whatever it is. And then before you know it, people get themselves in these situations where they don't even know what to do, but they'll look back 100% of the time. I mean, you can probably attest to this also. How many times in your life have you thought like, damn, like I knew, I knew my gut told me, whether good or bad, like it would have been a good thing or it would have been a bad thing. Like my gut told me, and I tell people all the time in my life coaching, like forget what your head says and forget what your heart says. Like do not listen to either of those. Go with your gut because your gut will never steer you wrong. And I think that that's like a very internal dialogue that needs to be like reconnected.
Oh wow, man. Yeah, and that is interesting because I've never, it was like in the words in the conversation is where, yeah, well, don't trust emotion. Well, people consider the gut an emotion, but I'm like, oh, I never really thought of head, heart, gut. Although people are focusing much more on the gut nowadays, talking, hey, there's 8 signals your gut sends your
Yeah.
brain for every one that your brain sends your gut, why gut health is important, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but in growing up, were your parents, what did they do for a living? And because did they teach you any of this, let's say, some people refer to it as hippie woo woo shit, like kind of
Oh no.
feeling stuff, or
Yeah.
were they more
No, they
traditional parents?
very traditional. Very, yeah.
Okay.
I've done a lot of thinking about this lately even, so my parents, my dad he still does the same thing I do, doing inspection, non-destructive testing. He was the one that got me into this industry. It's basically doing inspection of like it's really everywhere that nobody knows about. It's in
Right.
automotive, it's in pharmaceutical plants, it's in oil and gas, it's in everywhere. Any sort of factory needs inspection. When they shut down, we look for cracks, like any sort of stuff like that to make sure asset integrity to keep things going, stuff like that. So that's what he did or still does. He's owner of a company here in Grand Rapids. And then my mother worked at J.C. Penney, retired from J.C. Penney as a visual merchandiser. And I think she just did it as like something local that was an easy thing that she could do part-time money in the beginning
And
and
focus on
got
being a mom.
Exactly. Yep. She was able, if she needed to leave to pick one of us up from school because we were sick or there was an accident or something, I was on a first name basis with the ER in middle school. So like that was, that was a thing. So she was able to do that, and so, but they mirrored my grandparents' parenting very much, in my opinion, the way that I kind of see it. And they did a great job of it. Like I said, we never went without. We never went, we may not have had the best of thing, but we never went without. And and so then they didn't teach me any of this. Like, I mean, I do believe I'm largely in part a hippie. Like my therapist will always call me like a new age hippie. She's like,
Yeah.
you are just so different, and the way that you view things and everything is just far different than most. And no, they're not that way at all. I'm the middle child, always been the black sheep, always been I've always gone to the beat of my own drum all my life. That's just always kind of been me. And looking back, like I think other people realized that more than I did.
Right.
Uh, until like the last probably 4 years, I've literally like, if man, Richard, if you would have met me 5 years ago, I don't even know if we would be having this podcast today. Like you probably wouldn't wanted anything to do with me on here at that time. Um, but no, they were great parents. My dad would work on the road part of the time. So, and my mom had to work, get pennies throughout the day, stuff. So like in the summers, for a large part, we were kind of left to our own devices, where it was like we just had to be home by dinner and we could kind of do whatever we want. And I say that they were a little absent in the sense, but I think that it was also largely in part that we just didn't let them know what the hell we were doing. And like
Yeah.
now, like as adults, we'll allow these stories to come out and to see the look on my parents' faces, like is like
Yeah.
I laugh about it now, but I have a 15-year-old, and I even made a post on my Facebook a few months ago about this. Like he went out to go fishing with some friends, for the day. And like I dropped them off. They're in the town next to us, so it was about 7 miles away. I went and dropped them all off to go fishing and everything. And I left and I came home, and I'm just like, oh, they've been gone a few hours. Like, what would I have been doing at 15? Like, just like instant anxiety and panic, And I'm like checking his location. Like, he's still at the river. Okay. Okay. Like, whew, this is a lot. Like, this is like, because all I'm doing is like perceiving what I did as at 15 years old. I was a little asshole. And, who knows what I would have been doing? Nothing good, I'm sure. But like, just, and so, but he is nothing like me. He's
Yeah.
such a genuinely like good and kind. I will get choked up talking about Landon because he is such a good fucking kid. And I don't mean to swear, I'm sorry, but he is
Yeah.
like he is he hasn't lost his innocence yet at 15. And like it's wild to me. And at last year he went to an eighth grade dance with this girl. And so like first time he'd ever even like done anything like this. So I'm just like, whoa. Like, hey,
Yeah.
so I take my camera, I'm doing photos with him and stuff, and he's got her corsage, and he literally like goes over to her, he grabs her by the arm, and he's like, hey, why don't you come over here? Like the way that he handled the whole situation, he was leading her. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like look at him.
Well,
Like
it's
he's
funny you said something about losing innocence, and I'm like, what if we don't call it that? What if we just say that? How about you're raising a good person, and
oh sure.
we're reintroducing good people actually back into the world that we can get comfortable with, like a shift in movement. Because this whole time, like, I've kind of thought of this thing of, as the US, and what was the focus in the 80s and 90s. Okay, you come out of like World War II, you focus on economy, the industrial age, yada yada yada. We become, everything's better for everybody. Economy, economy, economy. But what was missing in all this that we figured out 30, 40 years later is that piece of kind of like love of what they were talking about in the 60s and the Beatles.
Yeah.
All you need is love. And you've heard people who make a certain amount of money, let's say not Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, that money doesn't make you happy. Money doesn't buy happiness, and that it's really about these other things. And yes, I think it's good to be the US and have a good economy and all that kind of stuff. However, are did we when you were sold this bill of goods and all this other stuff, are we listening to our own advice of money can't make you happy? Money's not going to solve the problem that we have here in the
Right.
US. Obviously, because you know, people aren't taking fentanyl to fill their money problems.
No, no,
They're
it's
taking it to fill their emotional problems.
yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you completely. I've been in the oil and gas industry for, over 20 years cumulatively, and took a hiatus for 4 years. But um, yeah, oil and gas is a largely well-paying industry. And so when let's see, like I went to college in Minnesota, that was like '03 to 0, no, yeah, 2003 to 2005 or something like that. Anyway, and then from there, I moved down to the Virgin Islands, and I lived in St. Croix for just under 2 years, working at an oil refinery down there, and came back from there and basically went straight to work in Alaska. So that would have been, I came back the end of '08, and then got in touch with my wife, ex-wife. We went to high school together, so we were like
Hmm.
friends back then, and I had like the biggest crush on her back then. But anyway, and we got back in touch, and then I went to work in Alaska, and I think we could both agree now, like we just blew through every red flag. We
You
literally
painted
fell
them
in love.
green,
Oh, well, we fell in love with the idea, how they say, like you fall in love with the idea of someone.
right?
And we fell in love with the idea of what we thought we had in high school as friends. And with really not even knowing each other that well. Not as what we probably should have, at least. So when we got back in touch, we just jumped right into dating. And it was just like poof, done. She had already had a little girl. It was like a ready-made family. Like I jumped in, with the role model of the father figure to her daughter, and her daughter's within 6 months was calling me dad, and I accepted it and was like, absolutely. And and then was working in Alaska, making six figures and doing well. And we had a house with 10 acres on a river. We had the Yukon Denali. We had the pontoon and the four-wheeler and all of the things. And, and we would always look for happiness at the bottom of the checkbook, you know, like that's a good way to look at it. And it was like, we were always taking the vacations and doing all the things and all this stuff, and never giving any mind to like what genuinely made us happy.
Or even like being
And
able to, I equate it to like, can you just sit still in silence together in the car? Like it does.
no,
Why does
yeah,
it? Why does it have to be in Italy
yeah,
off a
yeah,
coast on in a yacht? It
yeah, you're
doesn't.
so right. Yeah, you're so right. And yeah, no, we couldn't. And that explains so much. And we were, and um so we ended up divorcing in 2020. I lost my job in Alaska in 2020. And so I started the year of 2021 off unemployed, $30,000 in debt, and divorced.
So, hey, we sound like we were like that.
You know,
That's how we ended up connecting because 2022 was close. I didn't take it all the way like you, but I teeter tottered. I walked the plank for sure.
yeah. It was, and it was, well, I had to leave. It was that, and we don't need to get into that, but it was not a healthy environment. And so,
Yeah,
um,
I agree. Hey,
but,
mine. I look back at mine and go, hey, it was a blessing in disguise.
right.
And if I'm so glad if I had actually promoted one up to director of operations and gotten further in, would I have ever either would have went back, stayed in because it was monetarily beneficial, but not mentally and emotionally beneficial.
Yeah, it was good. So 2021, just really started out like uh I say unemployed. I should probably say more like self-employed because I didn't really stop. Like as soon as I lost my job, it was just like I had money in the bank from the divorce, kind of like what yeah, how it all settled out and stuff. And I had a good amount of seed to start. And so I bought and flipped a house and started going. But I guess where I was going with that was, we I've always made good money. It's always been money's always came freely to me,
Hmm.
in a sense, and I'm very grateful for that because it's just like I don't know if it's my mindset or how it is, but it's always just kind of worked out. And making that money all that time in the oil field and having the life of, the beautiful house and all the toys and the nice car and the vacations and all of this, like I was miserable. Literally miserable, and I didn't even know what it took to be happy. And so once I was away from that relationship, and the job played zero part in uh my happiness, other than maybe feeding what didn't make me happy.
Right.
um but you can never out earn a poor spending habit. And so we after that happened, I had to watch every dollar. And I was still living the life of like, oh man, going out and having lunch with buddies and turning it into a day of drinking.
Right.
And just like living that life. I had a pontoon rental business in Saugatuck, Michigan, and I did very well on that, like very well. And it was very lucrative, but when I was down there, I would sleep in my truck for a week at a time because I didn't want to drive an hour back and forth and everything. So I would just stay there. And there was a marina that I had houseboats with my ex-wife, and I remembered the passcode to be able to go and shower, do laundry, all that stuff. So I would sleep in my truck, but I was still showering every morning. I'd do my laundry, everything was good. And I would just stay at my dock where my pontoons were. And but with that, like I'm not cooking.
Right.
So every meal was going to a bar and restaurant. And at this bar and restaurant, I'm self-employed. If I want to have a handful of drinks while having lunch, my boat is out making money. So like
Right.
I don't have to do anything. And so I would just start having a couple of drinks. The people would come back. I got a little shine on. Everybody's happy. I'm chumming them up. We're like, having a great time. All this. They leave. I clean the boat up, and then I just take the boat out myself. And so I'm out on Lake Michigan or out cruising the channel or whatever and having drinks and meeting people. They'd get on the boat with me. We would go around, all this. And I did that for an entire summer. And so that was one summer, and then the next summer was the bus, and that was when I had built the bus that spring with some friends. Those guys did an incredible work with me too. Like I couldn't have done it without the group of guys that I had, and like literally, and built the bus. And then that was that summer of I was at the beach every weekend with the bus, whether I had my son or not. We were out there, and it was, when you're at the beach and you got a bus like that and everything, it's like we're having
Right.
drinks and, doing, all this stuff and hustling and figuring out a way to sell the bus or promote it or anything like that. And I had a friend of mine, she kind of talked to me one time and she's like, Michael, like, how much do you think you've spent on that lifestyle in the last 2 years? I was like, I don't know, like whatever. And she's like, no, seriously. She's like, let's like have a real talk about this. And she was like, let's just figure it out. How much a week do you think? And I don't remember what it was. We came down with some numbers, fairly conservative, not just on alcohol, but like that lifestyle of, because once you're out, you're gonna eat too. You're gonna
Right.
do, or you're spending money on other things. You're tipping everywhere all along the way, all this stuff. And we even pulled up some bank statements and looked at, money flowing, everything. And in the first 2 years of being out of Alaska, it was about 30 grand.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, that's real money. That's real money. Like that's an investment, And it was like, who, like how did I do that? And so at that point I had started like toying with the idea of removing alcohol from my life, just on I'm a money man, and
Right.
so like that was a very big eye opener for me. And that went all the way till 2023, January 2nd of 2023, I saw TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy says I'm in such control of my mind and my body that I can be around other people that are drinking and not drink. And I was like, damn. And when he did that, he reframed it as a mental challenge. And nobody will beat me in a mental game. Like nobody will beat me in a mental game. And I'm like, that's it. And it was a literal light switch. I just was like, okay, I think I'm done. I said, I'm gonna go. That was January. My birthday's in March. I said, I'm gonna go to my birthday without drinking. Because at 40 years old, if I can't go 90 days without drinking,
Right.
that is a problem. And so I did about 3 weeks in, I just knew that I was done. And I haven't drank since. It's been over 2 years now. And I don't, it's a lot of people, oh, congratulations, congratulations. I'm like, look, I just realized I didn't like it. That's all. I gave my body a chance to like enough of a time without it to understand that I just didn't like it. If I didn't like mayonnaise and I went 289 days without mayonnaise, nobody's gonna be like, "Oh man, congratulations on no mayonnaise for 289 days, bro." Like
Your
why do we put
trainer
that
might.
focus? Yeah, why do we put that focus on alcohol like that? And
Yeah. Well, I
so
think a lot of it though is, partially too because I'm coming up on 2 years, so it's like
good job.
I think because people realize that that was another thing I guess that was accepted and is okay, like growing up during those years and, starting to realize, hey, um, it's just not as healthy or as fun or as, what it contributes to. And like you said, I think once you start drinking, then you're less control with you're gonna tip more because you're happy. You're a little
Hmm.
loose. You're gonna let a
Yeah,
little more flow. And so when you're living that lifestyle, especially on the beach and just having fun, like man, I know, like I was up there in Michigan in the summer on the lake. It's just like,
that's what it is.
it would
It's just,
it sounds like, oh man, what's wrong with that lifestyle? It sounds like a lot of fun. However, um, yes, maybe for a day or two, it could be fun,
right.
in moderation. But I think
Oh, see, you
we
you
take
used a word
everything
that I can't stand.
moderation,
Moderation.
but we take
Moderation is
everything.
the slow acceptance of failure.
We think that anything good would be better if it was all the time. I think no matter
Well,
what it is.
and I think that people think that that things would be better even with alcohol. We've got like I think it's socially pushed in every aspect of life. You can go throw axes and drink alcohol. Like, how do we relate those two things together? Like it's so socially accepted in a grand sense of like, I guess I'm not saying this to people like
Hmm.
targeting anybody, but I think in a bigger picture, regular consumption of alcohol, even a couple of days a week, keeps you small-minded, preoccupied, and controllable. And because what like when you're drinking, you're small-minded because you're not thinking about anything else. You're not worried. That's why people drink. So they don't
Yeah,
have to think about anything else, right? So like it
exactly.
keeps you small-minded, preoccupied. Well, obviously, when you're drinking, what are you doing? You're sitting inside a box of four walls at a bar drinking, you're preoccupied with that, or you're floating down a river, or you're doing, whatever, you're preoccupied with whatever it is, not anything else outside of that, you know, and controllable. Well, how many people do dumb shit when they're drunk? You're very controllable.
Whew.
So, like, in a grand sense, like, that's all it does. And I think that that's why it's promoted in every aspect of life, like from the top down. I think that that's it because it keeps the masses dumb.
Yeah, I would imagine like if you went into a prison and you said what you just said and asked them how much it keeps them controllable or
Yeah.
small-minded. And it's like this idea of like And I would think about that, like, over the past whatever since I've quit drinking, I've lost a lot of weight too, and
Yeah.
it's kind of one of these things of like, well, okay, well, you get off at 5, you get home at 5:36, you crack open some whiskey and a beer, you start drinking, you drink for a couple of hours, you make your favorite foods and overeat, and then lay down and pass out. Oh, I wonder how the fuck you got 65 pounds overweight.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Right.
do that for
People,
5, 10 years. Oh,
oh man.
you
And
know,
people will spend money on gym memberships, they will do diet plans, they will do all of these things, but as soon as you bring up the idea of removing alcohol, that's the one thing that people have such a hard time doing.
well, what's funny is so it's interesting and it kind of they both tie in together. So before doing this, my 12 previous years were spent in healthcare. And I
Hmm.
always say, do you know when I started taking medicine for things was when I could afford it, when I worked in healthcare, when I had insurance because I could now afford it. And I used to manage healthcare clinics, and a lot of these medications and what they do is okay, well, if you take blood pressure medications, then you need labs every 3 months to make sure your kidneys aren't being damaged, okay, before they're going to refill them. Well, for me, one of an older nurse friend, basically, I was much younger and I'd had high blood pressure since I was 25 and ran 5 miles 3 times a week. It was hereditary, um, from being Latino. And he was like, well, do you want your dick to work? And I said, yes. He's like, well, then you need to take, it's $4, this medication. And so I would start taking it. Um, but the point is okay, then I could afford it. Well, fast forward, now I have this lifestyle routine of I'm coming home every day, drinking, making my favorite foods, and I can't sleep. I'm putting on weight, but I'm up to like 9 prescriptions.
Right.
Um, and then whenever I just figured out that alcohol wasn't the way, I realized what it was doing to me mentally, and I heard somebody explain it mentally in a way. He said basically what's happening is if you think of your brain in like RPMs, he goes, um, a little bit of dopamine might take it up to a normal range, like you're going through gears. He goes, but when you give it alcohol, it's like redlining it and you enjoy it. But what goes up must come down. You're getting that full swing back. And I would
Yeah.
start to feel that. And I would notice that would be the depression for like 2 days, 2.5 days. Why are you always felt like shit? And why you're always ready to redline it again,
Yeah.
and get some alcohol in there. And once I saw that, and I was like, I just need to get the baseline and maintain baseline. And the only way to actually know where your baseline is to cut it out completely.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of decided with that. And then on top of it was the health benefit, of course. Um, but then you're unemployed. Now you don't have health insurance. Now you're cash pay, self pay.
Yeah.
You can't take as many prescriptions. You're paying cash pay visits, and while they were okay, and now you need all these labs, now there's a real conscious decision and effort of I can't afford all this. I better start taking care of myself. And
Right.
as went the process of losing 65 pounds, going from 9 prescriptions to one. I
Yeah.
mean, you know,
Good for you.
and it's like, who knows? Can I get it out? But at 48, I equate it to this thing of longevity, being a parent, being away from being around for my daughter, but also with everything going on, call it what you will. I mean, I'm from Texas. The zombie apocalypse happens, and I can no longer get my one blood pressure medication. I'm now 65 pounds less. I know I can eat healthier. I know I can exercise. I know I can control it and keep it within a range to where if I can't get it, I can't get it. But if I needed 9 prescriptions and the zombie apocalypse happened, or the trade wars or whatever,
Right.
if
Who knows what?
anything,
Right.
yes, if anything prevented me from getting that, then you're fucked. And a lot of people don't realize like you're just shooting yourself in the foot, stepping on your own dick
Right.
when you do
Yep.
that. Especially as a man, when it comes to if you're a father, the leader of your household, your kids see what you do, they don't hear what the fuck you say. So it's by being the example,
Yeah.
um, but also thinking kind of that long-term thing of, man, if some of these things actually happen, there was a shortage or you were attacked and you seriously needed that and depended on that, you're screwed if you can't get it. So what's the best way is to not to be independent, to be self-sufficient.
Yeah, your
Um,
health truly is your wealth. Like, and I know that's like a cliche, like click word that people hear, but until you are in a position like you and I, like you just like you said, self-employed, cash based, and like put in a position where it's like, all right, do I want to spend $130 on my prescriptions for this week, or do I want to spend $130 on my groceries for this week? And so like when you're put into that position and then like you said, you start making these changes in your life and you're like, dude, I didn't even need that. And then with those came all of these other side effects that caused me to take other prescriptions and everything else. And it's all a racket. And you're just like, damn. And you realize like all it took was just a little bit of discipline on my part to like not engage in all of these like harmful activities. And
well,
before you know
the
it,
longevity too, though, your grandmother at 92. So I did live in caregiving for a 97-year-old, and
yeah,
how is she? What was her like? Does she have any secrets? What's her health like? What's her routine like that
I've
gets her
never
to
asked her.
92?
I've never asked her what it was, but I think but my grandma, both of my grandparents, I will say like I have the term now, but they lived, they lived their advice. They didn't give their advice.
Right.
And they were always very active. Even in their old age, like even just going for a walk. My grandfather he had the what God did him in was his strokes, and dementia. But even to the very bitter end, he would be pacing the hallways of his home with his walker. Just he was always staying active, always walking. Not what when he before he was in the home, he'd walk the streets. Like the road they lived on, very nice, quiet, dead end road, but he would always, every day before that, when they would ride bikes, and then when they were no longer able to, they would walk, whatever it was. But always, always, always active, always ate very well, and cooked. They
Yeah.
cooked at home, and um, they didn't preach this, but I would see it in how they cooked. Was they did their shopping on the outside of the market.
Yeah.
They didn't go down the hall aisle. When you go down the aisles, that's where everything goes wrong.
And the
That
boxes.
that the boxes, the preservatives, anything that can sit out for that long isn't good. And so that was, and like they stayed on the outside. Just and I don't like I said, they've never told me that, but looking at opening their fridge as kids, it was always fresh fruits and vegetables. It was always, meats, and like it was that sort of thing. It was never, maybe like a thing of Fig Newtons in the cupboard.
Yeah.
Like that there might have been something like that, but very rarely was there ever anything.
Did they pickle stuff?
Oh yeah. Yeah, my grandma had a garden like you wouldn't believe when I was young. When I was very young, when it got too much for her, obviously she had to
Right.
stop. But yeah, oh yeah, she always had a garden, always canned, stewed tomatoes and all of they can she canned every year. My grandma was, in my opinion, she's like the gold standard for a woman in my eyes. Like she genuinely is a woman in every sense of the word.
There's
She
like a
would
there's
pick
like a whole
all of
set
my
of
mom's clothes.
skills,
Yes.
like just like a man would have a set of skills of like making sure the pipes don't freeze. There's a
Yeah.
whole set of skills that a mom, like if you know what a good mom, good woman like is,
Yeah.
it's tough.
Oh, like I've been single for 5 years and I haven't even dated in three. And I've got a lot of that sort of stuff comes up a lot. Like, what are you looking for in a woman? What do what is a good woman to you? All this, why are you single? And by choice. But honestly, it's like that's what I want in a woman. Like my grandmother made all of my mom's clothes.
It needs to be
And
a
I'm
value
not
add to
saying
your life.
right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so my wedding, my mom's wedding dress, my grandma made it. Prom dresses, my grandma made it. Like my grandfather, there's a story. My grandfather went out hunting one day because they didn't have a whole lot growing up, and my grandpa would had gone out hunting to get something for dinner, like it was that sort of life.
Yeah.
And while he was gone, a grouse had flown into the bay window, and just like knocked itself out. And my grandma, literally out of instinct, ran outside, grabbed it by the neck, wrung its neck, plucked it, cleaned the whole thing, and started cooking dinner with it. Like that, that's what my grandmother did. And my grandpa didn't get anything when he went hunting. So he came home literally thinking it was butter sandwiches again. And he walks into the house smelling amazing, and he was like, "Well, what's for dinner?" And she's like, "Grouse." And he's like, "I didn't get anything." And she was like, "No, I did."
Uh-huh.
And it was just like, so like that story is like a story that will always live on in our family. And that's something where it's like my grandmother did what needed to be done, not what wanted to be done.
You know, it's
You know,
funny.
like
It's funny, like, because when you tell that story, like, I look at this thing, and anybody who wouldn't know you or hadn't heard any of this, um, like, that so supports, like, a view of, yes, I want women to have these rights and be able to be CEOs and be independent. I want these things from that. I want them to be the go-getter, like your grandmother was, like a
hmm
problem solver,
right.
an equal,
Yeah, absolutely. Right, very much
but
so.
in their own way, and
Exactly.
still contributing to what we thought we didn't need that is now missing in the world.
Well, I don't understand why would a woman want to be a man?
Yeah, I don't either.
Why, like, and I don't mean like in a gender changing sense, but like even in the equality sense of society, or like,
Hey,
do
if you
you
had to feel the
they
way I felt when I rolled out of bed, you wouldn't want any
right,
part of it.
if they knew like the burdens that we carry on a daily basis just as
Yeah,
being a man, like, and it's
being good
different for
enough.
everybody, and it's all
Yeah.
right, yeah, absolutely. So there's all like, no, like women should have it easy in a sense of like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say it. Maybe I have to be careful how I
Well,
word that. Like
they should be nurtured and protected,
they right,
and
100%.
well, and respected and loved,
We're different.
and
We're different in ways for a reason.
yes,
Like a true feminine woman will bring out like the certain things of a man. The support, like when they support a man, like they, like with love and respect, like and encouragement, like the things that man can do and create for the family
yes.
are tenfold,
Mm-hmm.
or 100, and vice versa. What the man can do for a woman when he provides her that safe and secure place, and all of that, like emotional, financial, all of those things. When those two feed each other like that, like that's the love that our grandparents had. That's the life that our grandparents had. And when people these days always say, "Oh, I want what my grandparents had," that's awesome. I agree with you, but that means that you got to be willing to do what they did, and
Mm.
and there's a lot of people that aren't willing to do that, men and women. I'm not saying that it's just on the women, and I'm not saying it's just on the men. It's both sides. And
Well, and
and
the other thing is how do you just like technology, how do you fast forward that equation of what your grandparents had and translate it into 2025? Because your grandparents didn't, that love wasn't cultivated almost like a farm
right,
with antibiotics and all the shit that we put into our food nowadays. They cultivated their crops much pure. They cultivated their love much pure.
yeah.
Now we live in a world where everything is sped up for the purpose of capitalism and monetary growth and
Well,
greed.
and or even instant gratification
Yeah, we want
is
it
such a
now.
thing. Yeah, like it's well, I mean, look, even with TikTok can be used, like minute long videos or something like that. Or like when people watch these minute long things, like how often do you, after 10 seconds, you're already like swiping to the next one. You're like, our attention span is so fast now. Like we're so quick to move past whatever doesn't stimulate us. And to think that that doesn't correlate into other aspects of our life, like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it comes, I'm in this huge season of my life discovering the importance of self-discipline.
It's almost like dismiss. You would be, the thing is quick to swipe, quick to dismiss, which would
Right.
mean if you had a real threat brewing, you could be quick to dismiss it because and the other problem is one of the things you had mentioned earlier, and I listen, like, let's say, like the Sean Ryan show, and they asked a question of what media sources do you trust nowadays. um
Joe Rogan.
yeah, yeah. Well,
That's it.
but people are trusting podcasts. So I listened to Ben Affleck, the
Yeah.
accountant who came out. He did an interview with Theo Vaughn. So the way that actors and actresses would do these press runs and to whatever company owned and put out the movie, now it's going towards Theo Vaughn had on JD Vance, the president. Now he's having on Ben Affleck. And so people are going to where there's more truth, more openness, I
Right.
guess,
Yeah.
less constraint, or I don't know.
There's less financial control and incentive.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
Joe Rogan is completely
yeah.
self-funded. He doesn't care what money is behind anything,
There's
and same
nothing in
with
it for
Theo or
him.
like right. I watched Jordan Peterson. I went and watched him speak a couple of years ago,
How was
and he
it?
had actually in, incredible, absolutely incredible. He was pushing one of his books, but it was just like that man. Like I genuinely respect that man and his views probably more than anything because he's in a large sense I've gotten that's where I've gotten a lot of my own character traits as far as like just a very raw and real person. Like he doesn't
Logical.
when you speak the truth, nothing else matters, because like nobody can argue it.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's
It's
what I always say. I go, doing the right thing never goes out of style.
mm-mm,
Nobody
no.
can argue. Nobody can argue with what's right.
Right. Exactly. And that's the best way to go about it. But he was talking about Joe Rogan and he's like, when in the how we view intelligence, it's like what is intelligence? It's like, well, intelligence is having a vast knowledge of multiple things like to a great degree. And he's like, so if that's the base that we're using for intelligence, then by definition, Joe Rogan is probably the most intelligent man in the world because he spends hours at a time with people that are the top of each category, whatever it is that he's talking about, whether it be politics, health, uh, energy, whatever it is, the people that he has on his show are the top people in that sector. And he's spending hours at a time with them asking all of the questions that we all just wonder.
Yeah.
And he's getting the best possible answers. So by definition, he's the most intelligent person in the world. And it's like when he said that, I was like, damn, that's so true. And I really like watching him because he's not afraid to ask the questions that we're wondering, regardless of who's on the show, whether it be the president or whether it be, you know, Mark Zuckerberg.
Right.
So, like he's saying the things that we all wanted to know about Facebook to Zuckerberg. Like what happened with the censoring? Where were you on that? Why,
Well,
what's
and
going on?
especially because, like him, he's a, and he would probably admit it. He's a, Cro-Magnon Australopithecus type at best. He's a
Yeah,
gym bro, and so he's not afraid to ask the quote unquote. They always say there are no dumb questions, but you know,
right,
super intelligent people can sure make you feel otherwise when you fucking ask a question that seems dumb.
right. Absolutely. But it's but I think that's what makes him so intelligent is that he's asking those questions to better he's not afraid to ask the question to better understand the situation. or
Yeah.
subject.
Or to say
You know,
like,
like,
hey, I just don't get it or I don't
right,
understand.
right. And
Yeah.
he's open to every aspect. So like it's not just again on a politics stake, as I
Yeah.
say, it's like it's not just right or left. He's like he wants both. He's gonna have them both on there. He wants to get both sides. Like he wants to hear about it and give them the time to like explain their point of view and ask the questions that we all ask, you know, and all of these things. So like that's he's just true center of the road, you know, unbiased type of guy, in my opinion. And I'm sure that there's probably a lot of people
Oh
that feel
yeah.
otherwise, but you know, but regardless, like that's just how I view it, and that's where I go to, I guess, in a sense, find the truth, which is crazy to think
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
day and age
No.
because we grew up with Fear Factor Joe Rogan. Like
Yeah.
that's the that's the you know, or the stand-up comedian Joe Rogan,
Yeah.
not this guy that he is today. But
My top three,
um,
probably my top three are like Joe Rogan, Sean Ryan show, and Mike Ritland's mic drop. They're all three kind of, you got two Navy SEALs. Sean Ryan's been on Joe Rogan. Oh,
yeah,
Cleared Hot with Andy Stump. I listen to a lot of that, but a lot of long form. Um, and typically people who are very much against whether you want to call it censorship. And they've been with the people's places and things that I feel like they have the authority. Um, but they're all kind of, you know, mid I would say in a way middle of the road, but it's like what's right is right. And that's
right,
really like the end of the discussion, and kind of
yep,
like in a way of I would say I don't know. It's easy as a Texan, I think to have a little bit of pride, but kind of you strike me as kind of that same way of, hey, like what we have, the reason you can go out with your camera and go hunt and go fish is because of the freedom, because there's people out there. And I always remember this too. The most interesting thing, and this has always stuck with me. For the listeners, find this interesting, is you said your brother was in the Navy doing EOD or
still is,
whatever,
still is, yep.
and you said one day he asked you to change the worm on the line, and you're like, "Man, you're this hard dude, and you won't even change the worm on your hook." And he's like, I can be that person."
I can be hard when it's time to be hard.
Yeah, and I'm like, you have these group of people, they're in that category, and I feel like you have a lot of people who are running for office who are in this category. And the thing is like your brother. The thing is if all these groups of men who are capable of that, if they have to be, then we got problems to begin
Right,
with, you know?
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think kind of the world's in this place where you're starting to see that. And so, like a lot of the podcasts I'll listen to, and they'll have a lot of these veterans who come out of the GWAT, and now that they they've had to focus and take that same intensity of what they did in special operations, and now they're applying it to continuing to serve. Kind of like I had to learn my identity wasn't in healthcare, my identity was in service,
right,
but also um, a big focus in parenting and making better children and all that. Where did this factor into you? Because I know being a dad, having that free time, spending time, you're always out fishing with him, or if he has a half day or something like that, or maybe keeping him out of school for the first day of hunting
yeah,
season.
yeah.
Where did this desire, passion for being a good father, an engaging father, a present father, where did that come from?
Ooh. Um, in all honesty, I will probably say out of necessity in the beginning. Um, when I was in my marriage, I didn't, I was, well, first of all, I wasn't a good husband. I didn't know how to be. Nor did I care to be at that time in that relationship. So in turn, that kind of bled into, I was a good father, but not. not as good as what I could have been. And then when we went through the divorce, it was just him and I. Like I didn't have a choice. So if I wanted to go do this, it's like, hey, dude, like let's go. So in a sense, probably out of a little bit of selfishness, of like I want to go fishing, so you're gonna go. And he was 10, so it's not like he could stay home.
Right.
And so we would go, and there was then he would start to enjoy it and start to do things. Or like, okay, dude, we're gonna go mushroom hunting. We're gonna go do, whatever it was. He was tagging along, and I'll never forget. I took him duck hunting with a friend of mine on his property, and this is where like probably one of the biggest lessons on being present to my son came from. Like I get choked up because my buddy John is such a great father to his kids. He's got three kids, and that dude is just solid. And he's been through every phase of my life. I've known him since we were kids, and he's like literally been a true friend through it all. But we were walking through the field, going back to the marsh, and there was um, milk, milkweed
Hmm.
pods, and so they're just like a pod, and then on the inside is this very white and fluffy feather-like pods that go out to germinate. And so anyway, we're walking through and we were running late. And so I'm like, I'm in a rush to get back there. And I'm like, oh, dude, we got to get back to the ducks are going to be coming in any minute, all this. And Landon stopped and he's like, Dad, what's this? And he's looking at the milkweed pod. And I'm like, dude, come on, we got to go. We got to get going. And John like stopped, knelt down, and he's like, hey man, this is a milkweed pod. And he's like, this is what it is. So if you open it up, and he's like, if you look inside, it's got all these little, feather-like pods, and he starts throwing them up in the air, and the wind is kind of taking them. And he's like, you see the little brown piece on the bottom, that's the seed. And he's like, and these white things, that's what helps the wind catch it so it can kind of take it to wherever to spread it. And he's like, literally took the time to like explain the entire thing to him. And I was like, fuck. Like,
That was my job, my opportunity.
right. I didn't even have I didn't take that chance. I didn't take that opportunity to like give that to my son. And that was like a huge moment for me. Huge. And I've told John thank you for that probably a million times since. Like dude, that was a literal life-changing moment for me. And and that was early on in being single. And so I think that that probably played a very large role in my mindset of like stopping, taking a moment, and just explaining things to him. And I think when you do that, explain things to him. Like when I was growing up, my parents would say, go clean your room. I would go into my room, I'd look around, there's stuff on the floor. So I would just pick stuff up off the floor and put it away and sweep it under the rug or under the bed or in the closet or whatever the hell I did. And then, okay, I'm done. And then they would come in and they'd be like, what do you mean this is clean? This isn't clean. Da, 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 da." I'm like, well, I don't know what clean is. Like this is clean to me, it's all perception and so or perspective. And so like it's just they never like took the time to say, this is what I expect of a clean room.
This is what clean looks like
And then
and
and
why.
then and then do it right, exactly. And so at that moment with John doing that, that kind of like I mean like the compounding effects that that had throughout the rest of my parenting is just you can't even measure it,
I bet there was a
And
lot of
so
teachable moments. You know what I just thought back to and just remembered that you guys did
hmm.
was the train trip, traveling on
Oh
the
yeah.
train. And I was like,
Yeah.
I bet there was so many teachable moments there because you kind of have to like you have to know where your trains are going to stop. You have to plan on what you're going to hit that day. You have to plan to get back to the
Oh man.
train, how to travel and how to travel with minimal stuff because like I was in the Navy and when me and my brother-in-law who was a Marine when we travel with our wives and our children we're like man we've packed less for a 3-month deployment than a damn
Right.
5-day trip,
Yep. Yep.
so I was like I bet that was a you had a ton of um being able to teach somebody how to travel, how to be aware when you step off in a new city, what
Yep.
to look for, um, those kinds of things are invaluable, but I totally had forgotten about that trip and I was thinking about it. I don't know what made me think of it, but I was like, man, I
Oh,
bet that
well,
was
you're
so
right.
cool.
That was so yeah, I'll touch on that. We the go back to the explaining like when Landon was when I left his mom, he was 10 and I just said, "Look, dude, like it's you and me here. So if I don't do it and you don't do it, it doesn't get done. And I'm not doing everything. So your job is the kitchen. Every day when I'm done cooking, you clean the kitchen, and I mean clean the whole kitchen. Wipe the countertops down, do the dishes, dry the sink out because I'm weird and I don't like watermarks in the sink. Like, and I showed him this is what it takes. And I went through it all and I just made him just sit and watch. I was like, you don't have to do anything, but I want you pay attention to what I'm doing. And I would tell him in detail how I wanted it all. I'm like, you see how the glass cooktop doesn't have any streaks on it? Okay, it's because I made sure I did this, whatever. Like I'm OCD like that. I just, like this is what I expect. And I was like, okay, do you get that? Yeah. So we'll never have any issues, right? Nope. You sure? Yep. Okay, good. There you go. Next day, hey bro, like I'm done cooking. It's time for you to clean. And for the first little bit there was guff and a little bit back and I'm like, look bro, like this isn't this you don't get that option. Like this is it. You get this, you do this. I cooked for you, you clean. That's fair. Like help me out, dude. I'm not doing this. We're not It's not even going to be an argument, okay? Like that's it. And we have a very very high level of respect between the two of us. He knows that he's safe with me to come to me with literally anything and I will hear him.
Hey guys, quick break, but this one's important. If you're tired of setting goals that never leave the Notes app, or you're feeling stuck in the same cycle, let's change that. Accountability isn't about pressure, it's about partnership. I offer one on one accountability coaching for those who are ready to show up, not just for their goals, but for themselves, their families, and their purpose. Whether you're working on discipline, building better habits, or simply trying to stay consistent, I got you. No fluff, no judgment, just real conversations and real progress. If that sounds like something you need, hit the link in the show notes and let's connect. All right, back to the episode.
And understand him and even give him credit in it. Like if it's like, hey, if he can change my mind, dude, we will change the entire way we do things if you can make it make sense to me.
Right.
And and so that was where that started. But so now like moving on to the trip, what that trip was we went from Michigan to Alaska on that trip. And that was actually, I don't know if you saw the trip the year before. The year before, I did a solo trip from Alaska. I drove a truck from Homer, Alaska to Portland, Oregon. So it was 6 days going through Canada. And then when I got to Portland, I took a train from Portland to Milwaukee. And that's a 2-day run. And then when I
Mm-hmm.
got to Milwaukee, I stayed a night there, but then took the ferry across Lake Michigan back to Michigan. And so basically what we did was we did that trip in reverse, minus driving through Canada because we didn't have a vehicle to be driving. But so we took the ferry across Lake Michigan and then got to Milwaukee. And when we got to Milwaukee, we there was one great lesson there because we get to Milwaukee and Milwaukee Summerfest was going on. It's this huge
Yeah.
concert series. There's all sorts of things going on. A big fair, really. Great time. So much fun. I would love to go back. But we get there and like you said, we have everything on our backs. So we get there and we're going to the Summerfest to go get tickets and we're going to go walk in. We had checked the big luggages, but I had my backpack with my camera gear because I didn't want to leave it anywhere. And I think he had his backpack with just like general things that we would need like along throughout the day. And so we get there and there's a big sign that says no backpacks and no telephoto lenses. And I
Oh.
was like, well, shit, dude. Like, my backpack is a backpack with a telephoto lens. So, like, we're like doubly fucked on this deal. And so I was like, hey, and Landon's like, oh, we got to like come up with a reason why. And like, we'll tell him this or we'll tell him this. Like,
Make
trying
fake
to
press badges.
create, right, right. He's like, he's trying to create this scenario on why they should help us. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
no, dude. I was like, we're just going to be honest with him. Like, we're just going to tell him the truth. We don't need to create anything. And so I go to the woman at the ticket counter or the gate, and I was just like explaining, hey, we're on this cross country trip. We're on our way to Alaska. We've got 6 hours to kill till we catch the train, and we're just trying to find something to do. And I see your sign with the backpack and the camera and all that. And I was like, that's kind of what mine is, both. And I was like, it's like $20,000 worth of gear, so I'm not really wanting to like leave it anywhere unsecured. And we don't have a car to put it in or anything. And she's like, oh, she's like, you're gonna have to go to the ticket counter and then ask for, I can't remember the woman's name that was like the manager of it all, but we'll say Amber just for the story. I don't know what her name was. And so we go up and we go to whatever line was the shortest. We get to the ticket gate, and I was just like, "Hey, sir." I was like, "So, I'm like here to like see if I could get tickets and maybe leave my bag." And I was like, I was told I have to talk to this Amber or something." And like the look on his face was like, "Oh gosh, you got to talk to Amber." Like good luck. And so we're talking to the guy, and I kind of told him the whole story too, and he was very generous with it. And he's like, "Well, let me see. Like, I don't have a problem just keeping it right here next to me for you. Like, but we have to make sure that Amber's okay with it because like I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want. I'm like 100% like this is your job, dude. I don't want to cause anything." And he's like, "Well, go talk to Amber. You got to go through the gate. She'll be right at the table to the right." And so I'm like, "All right, and like I'm getting the vibe that this Amber is not going to be a pleasant, interaction." And I'm like, oh gosh. So I like go walk in and we get around the corner and I'm like, excuse me, like is there an Amber around? And this larger woman stands up and she's just like probably lives a very alternative lifestyle. And I was just like, hi. Um I was like, so I was told that I need to talk to you, and I like just went through the whole thing of what we were doing and stuff. And instantly she was just like, that is so awesome that you guys are doing that. She's like, absolutely. She's like, what? Like, yeah, well, you know what? Like, I'll tell you what, I'll put it in my office. He's like, I'll put it in my office. I was like, well, we talked to, Harold at the gate, and he said that he would keep it there. He was okay with it. She's like, no. She's like, I'd feel just much better if I just had it in my office. That way you don't have to worry about anything. She's like, when you're all done, just go back to him, tell him, that you're back, and he'll message me on the radio, and I'll come and get it for you. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And so like we go through that, we hand it all over, and Landon was present for all of it. So he saw how we were imposed that it was not going to be a good interaction with this Amber woman.
Yeah.
And I looked at him, I hit him on the arm, I'm like, you see that, dude?
You just never
Like
know.
just be honest. Just tell them like it is, bro. Like they don't know. Like if we would have created this whole freaking scenario that was not even real, you know what I mean? Like one, we would have had to keep up with that. And two, who knows if it would even have worked. I was like, but you just be open and honest with them. Like we're doing this cross country trip. And so like that was like lesson number one for him on that one. Like which was, it was like, dude, just be honest, dude. Like there's no reason to. Like we don't need,
Shout
and
out to fake Amber.
right, yeah, whoever it was. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thank you. If you hear this, I appreciate you.
I know,
And
but like
so,
when the universe works that way, that it kind of reminds you of like sometimes to me it's like not that I ever doubt, but it's like that reassurance of like if you just be a good person and you
right.
kind of go out there with the good intention
Yep.
that people can be receptive to that. And I don't care if it's a free cup of ice or stowing $20,000 worth of gear.
Right.
It's about the gesture.
Right. You do good and good will come on to you. And that was it. And so we went through the whole thing and we had a great time. We got on the train and it was a 2-day train ride from Milwaukee to Portland. And it can be taxing at times, because like when you stop at stations, there's not a lot of time.
Right.
They're like some you can stop. If it's a smaller one, they really don't let you stop because it's like, hey, we're gonna be there for like 5 minutes. Nobody's getting off. The larger ones, they'll be like, hey, we're gonna be there for 20 minutes. You'll have time to get off, stretch your legs, walk around quick, do what you want, but then we got to be back on. And so we would do that. And there's diner carts there. So like on the train, you get on the diner cart and, it seats 4 people per table. But if there's just two of you, they don't give it to just the two of you. They're putting two strangers there with you because it's all about money. They're there to
Yeah.
fill the seats, rightfully so. And so my AirPods are dying. And so we would go do that. So he learned all of that experience just going through like meeting people and just like interacting and hearing their story and telling our story. And then we went out to Portland And when we get to Portland, I wanted him to see Portland because I did an internship there 20 years ago and I saw what it was before it really went to shit. And you get there now and it's disgustingly sad to
Yeah.
see like the difference. And my intent with that was, you know what, dude, like this is what liberal policies get you. When like you've seen enough of the country, we've traveled all over the world really. Landon's seen a ton. For a 15-year-old, Landon has seen a lot in his life, and he's never seen anything like that. And he was just like, Dad, like we're walking down the street and there's this woman taking a shit right in a parking lot.
Whoa.
And he's like, Dad, that dude's taking a shit right there. And I was like, well, that's a woman. And yeah, he is. And he's like,
Mm.
what is going on? And like, no, no, it's like legal out there. Like, it's not an issue. And there's people living like in motorhomes in the street. Like, they will park in the middle of a road and just set up shop and start living there. Lawn chairs and
What
grills
you
sitting out.
permit, you promote.
Right.
That's a
And so,
leadership quote, and that's a
yeah,
world quote.
it's so true. And so he's seeing that. And I was like, this is Landon, like, just understand, like, that, like when you allow this to happen, this is what happens. And so, like, I wanted him to see that. Like, I thought just at that age, it was a very impactful time of life. And also, like, that, I mean, I don't know if you've been to Portland in recent years, but man, it's an entirely different world.
I've never
Like,
been, and I wish kind of I was able to have gone before because I was a big time foodie and
oh yeah.
but it was my wife and I we went to uh San Francisco for our honeymoon in 2012, I think, or 2013. And but the idea was kind of, if I'd had more money and more time would be to like drive to Vancouver, fly out there and then drive down the Pacific Coast Highway, hitting like Seattle, Portland. It was San Fran, Hollywood, San Diego,
Right.
big stops along the Pacific Coast Highway. But what it makes me think of is like one of my dreams is to my daughter goes to an art school and they don't have a high school would be to get a bus and drive around all 50 states podcasting and homeschooling her, let her be part of the podcast, produce because
Sure.
they do that at her school. But I think about my terms of when I think about it is if you can see history and politics and meet the people, see the people, the cuisine, understand why people come here, maybe of this ethnicity, why are there pockets of these people here or whatever.
Right.
But what you did of being able to say, this is what policy and voting looks like. I never liked politics because it was kind of boring or political
Right.
science. But how might it have impacted me, now that I look at it after spending a lot of time with Buck through the election and talking to him about the Great Depression and why he was in a Democratic household that went Republican and the change of ideas with Dwight D. Eisenhower and how it has impacted the country and somebody who lived through the Depression. And so you talking about taking him there and letting him see what happens, what you permit, you promote, that goes in leadership in your
Right.
company, that goes for the world at the political level and the leadership at the political level. And so it's like, how powerful that is. And that's kind of something I want to convey to my daughter in real time of this is the side of policy, not what you're reading in a book or what they're teaching in class. This is the reality of what happens when too many people with a certain view or a certain agenda
Right.
get behind something.
Yeah, Portland, when I went there on an internship in college, like, well, my first experience in Portland changed my life. Like, I went there on an internship before I went to college. My goal was literally I was going to college to go get the education to go come straight back to Michigan and go to work for the same company that I was working for before, just making more money. Like, that was like my entire mindset was that. And when I was in college, I did that internship out to Portland. It was a 2-month internship. And when I was out there, I was like, it opened my entire world. I was like, dude, there's no way I want to go back to Michigan. Like, there's so much out there to see. I don't want to just like go back to that. And so that like it had such a played such a role in my life at that time, and I'd known what it had kind of turned into, but and that was why I wanted to show it, and I wanted to see it again for myself, just to to see it. But that moment of that internship also played a big part in my raising of Landon with like doing this trip. Though, like exploring, getting him to see this. He's been to Puerto Rico twice. He's been to Florida a bunch. Like we've traveled as when I was married, we traveled a lot. you know, I have no problem pulling him out of school for any reason, for anything, because there's so many things that can't be taught in a classroom, and when I go there and it has like a reason for leaving, I will put right in there, like, because some things can't be taught in a classroom. Tuesdays are for the boys, whatever, like what, because I miss them. Whatever I want to put in there, like in my opinion, they don't need to know,
It's none of their
honestly.
business.
Like that,
I'm their parent.
it's exactly, but I will put in there whatever it is that I'm feeling for that day. I've been gone for 3 weeks and I wanted to take him to lunch. Who knows, whatever but so like I took him across. I wanted to open his eyes to like parts of the country, and different ways of traveling. The train was just something very different and unique, and the slower pace, less responsibility than driving, all that. And then we spent 2 days in Portland and drove around, walked around Portland a lot, got scooters and just would scooter all around, the two of us, and get lunch and whatever it was we wanted to do. We went hiking to a bunch of waterfalls, went out to Seaside, he got to see the Pacific Ocean for the first time. And then we flew to Alaska, drove down to Homer and fished with a good friend of mine down there, Joey. And Joey's such a great guy, and we spent 3 days with him, and we fished for 3 days, caught a bunch of halibut and cod and all sorts of stuff. He had just such an amazing time in Homer, and Homer is just a incredibly beautiful place on its own, let alone being able to do that fishing and have that experience. And then after that, we drove up to Palmer, Alaska, and stayed with a good friend of mine, JT, and his wife. Which I wouldn't be who I am today without that man. Like, he taught me everything I know about money and investing and all of that, the way money works, all of that. If I didn't know him prior to losing my job and over, like, I wouldn't. There's zero chance that I would have made it the last 4 years. None. And he really instilled so much knowledge in me, and he's a very wealthy person, very smart, very like great life, like amazing relationship with his wife, two incredible children, like just somebody that I respect immensely, and even model a part of who I am after. And I want Landon to see that also, because I want Landon to see what you can create with good morals, good discipline, good choices in life.
Not
And
everybody admires what you would think, like let's say Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs, that the person you're talking about has has wealth and stuff like that, but is also a solid dude, a solid
oh
human
man,
being.
like the amount of times that I've turned to him for advice, and like the advice that he gives is just like you go in thinking you're gonna get one, like you're looking for this part of advice or like something in this aspect. And while what he has to say is gonna like answer that, it's just something so much more. And you walk away from it just thinking like, damn, like that's so true. And or whatever. I mean, I don't even know of any specific, instances,
Yeah.
but literally I know I've walked away from conversations with him like that more than once. And I don't know how many times I've called him thanking him. Like, I know for one time when we had our houseboats, my ex and I had houseboats as Airbnbs, and I remember as we were refinishing them, I was sitting on the back of one night. It was just me, the kid, wife, and kids were gone, and I called him. I was watching the sunset off the back of of it, and I'm thinking like, there's no way I would be here without him. And so I called him up, and I'm like, dude, like I just got to tell you what I'm doing right now. Like, I'm sitting on top of a houseboat watching the sunset over the harbor. And the only thing I can think of doing is calling and thanking you, because I wouldn't be here without you. Like, this is it. And so we have that sort of like relationship. He's such a great guy, and like who he is as a husband and as a father is just like I think everybody should know him, really. Like I really do. And so when we went up there, we stayed with him, and JT's also the type that like the dude knows how to live. You know, he's not flashy in any way, but he knows how to entertain, he knows how to have fun, he knows how to experience life. And so we went there, we stayed with him, we rented side by sides. He had his own, but we rented one, and we went out Jim Creek, which is like it's like about a 3 hour trip was what, I mean, we were
Hmm.
taking our time, but crossing rivers and driving through dried creek beds, everything out to this glacier. And so we get all the way out, I think Matanuska Glacier, Knik Glacier, I think it's Matanuska. I can't remember which one it is, but get out to this glacier, and there's like 8 people out there. That's it. And we packed Subway, and we're just sitting out there eating lunch, skipping rocks across the water. They've got their dog playing, everything. And it's just like the flowers are blooming, the glacier's there, the mountains are surrounding us and everything. And it's just like this just awe-inspiring place. You know, and peacefully quiet. You don't hear anything. The sound of true silence is deafening. And so we're out there, and it's just like, what else is there to life, than something like this? And at 14, he's so aware of a child and so appreciative, and he just sat there and took it all in and loved all of it. We're riding through rivers, so like the water's coming into the side by side, and like we're like going through this stuff. We see Dall sheep like off the side of the mountain, like right next to us, and all of these things. And I'm like, dude, like this is living life. It's not about the fancy car in the driveway.
That's
It's not
why
about,
that's why I talk about when she goes into high school and they don't have a high school, of spending that time with her right before she
yeah.
turns 18 and embarks off on her own, because the idea is, if you can allow some of that to sink in, then there's this whole different understanding that you enter your young teens, early 20s. I mean, part of it I had from being in the Navy at 17, having my 19th birthday in Japan. There was a level of it, but there was some levels I missed that could have been get closed possibly by doing kind of what you do with him, you know?
It's it's not something that I have learned. Like if you would ask me 5 years ago how I was parenting, it's not even close. But man, I just love the relationship that we have. Like we're so close and so tight. And I am a firm believer that a parent should not be their child's best friend. Like,
Right.
I don't like that whole mindset of parenting is not like how I view your role as a parent. But through
It's like a
structure and
byproduct.
discipline and right yeah, that's a great way to put it, thank you. Through like the way that I've carried myself, and he's carried himself. Like it's not just the way that I've done it, it's the way that he's done it. We have very real conversations about everything in life, whether it be about our divorce, when I left his mom. And I never talk bad about her. It's never, ever, ever pointing a finger. It's very situational. It's not about her or me or anything. It's you know, very age appropriate and to the point. But I don't sugarcoat anything with him. And I think he appreciates that because he knows that he can come to me and I will tell him like it is. Just like with, I mean, anybody else in my life. The last thing I do is sugarcoat anything. Like it's like this is it. And we're so close. Like when it comes to anything in life, like I'm like, dude, just talk to me. Like we're good. Whatever it is, like, spit it out. Like don't try to
Yeah,
beat around the bush. Don't try to hem and haw. Like be direct.
you'll feel
Say what's
better.
on your mind. Right, exactly. Just get it out. You create all of this, inner turmoil and slight anxiety over trying to figure out how to like say something rather than just saying it.
Yeah, I tell my daughter, if we know the truth, then we can make the best decision on how to move forward. But only
Right.
if we know the truth. I'm like, I mean, it's like, hey, even if you told me you killed somebody, it's like, I may or may not help you bury the body. I may turn you in or may not, but you can tell me and we're gonna get through it somehow,
Right.
some way.
Right.
I'm not gonna love you any less. But how we proceed, it's like I gotta know the facts, and you can tell me anything. Nothing is, I worked 6 years in a level one trauma center. Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. There is
Yeah.
nothing that would surprise me. So bring it.
Yep. Yeah, that's I had a conversation with some friends a while back, like oh this is years and years ago. I was when I was still married, but we were talking we talked about that. Like somebody had asked, like, would you help your kid bury a body? And I was like, fuck yes. And all the heads turned and looked at me and I was like, what? Like you wouldn't? Like I was like, yeah, I mean I'm his ride or die. Like yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like I mean I might have to fess up down the road and tell him where we hit it, but like in the moment we're figuring we're gonna figure it out.
Well,
But
do you want them? Hey, it's like this. Like, do you want your kids to trust you, or do you want them to go get some shitty advice that's probably age inappropriate because the person that's their same age hasn't had that experience yet?
right.
Do you want them
Yep.
getting advice from that person? No.
Oh man.
You know?
He came to me, this is probably 10 months ago or so. I'm this is a I love this story, but I don't know how appropriate it is, but he I'm just sitting on the couch, I don't know, scrolling TikTok or something. And he comes out of his bedroom. He's like, Dad, we need to have a talk. And I was like, all right, bro, like, what do you got? And he's like, comes around the side of the couch and he's like, Dad, I need a trimmer for down there. And I just fucking lost it. And I'm like, bro, like, you don't even have armpit hair. Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, crap, crap, like, which is like lying or bullshit,
Yeah.
and he like pulls his shirt up and he like shows me, and there's like these two little tufts of hair in his armpits. And I'm like, just laughing my fucking ass off in tears. And I was like, all right, dude, like,
Use the code Rogan
I'll
for 20% off at Manscaped.
right. I'll get you a fucking trimmer. So literally, like, I have the Manscaped. I've got the Lawnmower 4.0.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, some parents would probably just get them like a cheap, thing. And I
Yeah.
was like, no, like, I'm gonna get him the same thing I've got. Like, I'm gonna get him a good one. And because, dude, you get a nick down there, it's never fun. And so
Yeah.
I'm like, so I get it for him, and I'm like, all right, like I hand it to him, and I was like, all right, bro, like listen to me. Like we gotta set some ground rules here. Okay? Like nobody should have to live in your mess. Got it? I'm like, you never see when I shave my face because I clean it all up. You never see any, I shave from my neck to my knees. You never see any of my mess. Got it? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, everything that you do as a man is done in the shower because it all goes down the drain.
Yep.
And he's like, okay. I'm like, no, no, no. Like, listen to me, dude. Everything you do as a man is done in the shower. Got it? Because it all goes down the drain. And he's like, okay. I'm like, cool. We had that talk. Like, gave it to him. Fast forward, like, I don't know, maybe like 3 weeks or something like that. I go open up the fucking shower, and dude, it looked like Chewbacca got in a fight with a weed whacker.
Ah,
And I was like, oh, get your ass in here. And he's like, what? I was like, clean that up. He's like, I did. I was like, bullshit, you did. I was like, look at that. And he like opens it up. He's like, oh, I was like, yeah, like I want to see that. And dude, he was like embarrassed, but like we were laughing about it. I don't give a shit. Like, I'm
right.
not gonna let and so and it was like, yeah, like the early puberty hairs where they're like so tight and curled. It's just like, get out, dude, like get out of here. But
Uh,
I'm dying laughing, talking to my friends about this story, and my friend Sherry, she's out in Arizona, and she's just a dear friend of mine. And she was like, something, she's like, if he will come to you and talk to you about that, he will talk to you about anything. And I was like, absolutely. Like I am 100% okay with him talking to me about that because like and that's where we are. Like he's 15 now, and you I don't think a lot of parents put thought into forethought into like creating a good kid or like explaining life to them or preparing them for life or
To
anything
be
else
a
like
good, how to be a good human being. Because I
right
feel like
and
it's
and
about
how to like
everything that we thought it wasn't.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, my parents not no fault to there or anything like that, but my parents didn't necessarily like prepare me for life.
The world was on a different frequency. What they thought we needed was obviously was to be sent to public school, and whatever agenda was put
Right,
was pushed there was fine and appropriate to raise good citizens of the world, but 20, 30, 40 years down the road, we know this not to be true.
right. I mean, if you look at like how school works, you know, I don't know if these are still going, but you know, schools really what do you do from a very early age? When you go to school, you are taught to sit at a station and perform a task for 8 hours a day.
And get in line, take short breaks,
Right.
take your lunch at this time,
Yep. And ask to go to the bathroom.
follow rules,
Right. And what do we do when we get into the workforce? We are told to sit at a desk, perform a task for 8 hours a day.
take short
Same thing.
breaks.
Right. They are creating worker bees to feed the machine.
Only we don't 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the water cooler. We gossip around it
Right.
instead.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's just a totally different and I'm the one that like will break away from that. Like I've spoke to students at schools locally here. A friend of mine's a teacher and she's asked me to speak to students and I go in and I speak clearly against college. Like, you know, if the government's so quick to loan you money to go into debt to go to school, but to get a loan to start a business is like the hardest thing.
Well, somebody was saying, what was it? Um, it was Cleared Hot. I think I was listening to Friday or whatever day, and they said that the same what you just said. Like, you want to buy a house, you have to have a certain debt to income ratio, and all the
Yeah.
qualifications you need for that are just fucking bypassed when it comes to this, to
Yeah.
student loans.
Yeah.
It's just all
They
fucking
want to keep you in debt.
consideration thrown out the door.
Yeah. They want to keep you in. Oh, you're going to go to school? Yeah, we'll give you 100 grand to go to school. But if I wanted 100 grand to go buy an investment property, that's going to over the long term make me way more money because it's an appreciating asset that's paying me monthly, creating passive income. You know, like to get something like that is near impossible.
Oh man,
But if you want to go in debt to go to school, you're good.
imagine at 18, it's like, oh, like you could, because I mean, what is I mean, Harvard's probably what 52,000 a year, so you're coming out 200 grand in debt. So
Right.
imagine at 18, it's like, hey, you want to go to Harvard, or here's 200 bucks. You can open up a fucking float tank business and a smoke shop, and
Right.
fucking here's $200 worth of investment, and I guarantee you in the next 5 years you're gonna be able to pay that back, and
Right.
you know,
Well, yeah, because you start out college in debt, making
no ability to repay
bottom
it
of the
back,
barrel wages.
no experience
Right.
to get the job that earns the amount of money that shrinks that debt to income ratio.
Right. It's all by design, you know, and yeah, so that's why I just speak incredibly against now trades. I'm all about, you know, going into the trade. Yes, that's a very great thing. But, you know, we have a mass of people that were sold a bill of goods of like, you can go to school for anything. So we have people going to school for 18th century Russian literature that get a master's degree in that and then wonder why they're at Walmart and they can't find a job. Like,
Yeah. No, and
what
I,
did
I
you think
think
that you were gonna do?
I think kind of where you combine the two is like, let's say um where like biotechnical and or chemical engineering, you oil and gas and all that, kind of where some of the trade and college meet, maybe like whether it's inspecting structural integrity,
Yeah,
different things like that. because there's, places where they overlap that you're not totally in the office, you're not totally a tradesperson,
Right.
but you are kind of in between. And I think, because like for me, did I need a master's in healthcare administration? Probably not. Um, but what I got from college was when you're getting a graduate degree, starting a new job, a new role with a 1 year old, relocating, it taught me what I was capable of doing
Right.
because I had a lot to fucking do to go to grad school and do all this shit with a 1 year old. Um, and it taught me how to learn. I know processes and different things. And when it comes to possibly wanting to be an entrepreneur or whatever, I've been able to take courses, complete them on my own with my own drive. I don't have to be told a lot of
Yeah.
things. And so there is some value in that, but I agree. Like, I think when I was coming up in the 80s, trades were kind of looked at as less than that. If you were
Very
less
much so.
smart, you worked with your hands. And if you
Yep.
were
Yep.
smart, you went to school. And that's, and I missed out on, I mean, basic man shit, like how to just, do shit around the house. I'm not even
Right.
very handy with that. And my dad was kind of that school where he worked in construction and then got injured and went to school, and so he pushed school because he got injured and said, "Son, your body's going to give out. You get injured, you fuck up your
Right.
back. You're going to need to go to school anyway. Just bypass the injury and the trade and
Right.
go to
Yeah.
school."
Yeah.
But that's just not true. And I learned in 2020, like even with a master's, well, hey, let's keep the people without a fucking master's. We don't really need a master's. Yes, I know we said it was a requirement, and yes, it was at one time, but the world's in this state and we're all about money, and a
Right.
master's is no longer required. You no longer need it. I don't know why you fucking got it. Blah, 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 blah. And so I think there's a fine line. I mean, I value academia in a way, and then there's a piece of me that resents it.
I value my time. I think that like I tell Landon and any child, like go into whatever you can that's going to provide you the amount of time that you want. Like think about if you want to be inside or outside. Think about those things. Like are you okay working inside every day, or would you really have the need to be outside? Think about those. What's going to give you the most time? As much as I despise school as a thing, school teachers have a really great schedule.
Oh, I used to
You
work.
know?
I was a sous chef at a place that one of the waiters was a teacher um, during the year and used to wait tables in the evening for fun in the summer. And all
Right.
day he would float. He would actually on the New Braunfels River in San Marcos, a lot of people go tubing. He would go near the tube chutes and he would actually go diving because people lose rings, watches, and
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff. So he would actually go diving during the day, come wait tables at night, and
Right.
just fucking, it was great for him.
Ideally, what I'd like to see Landon do, and we've talked about it a little bit, is like I'd like to get him up in Alaska, working where I'm working, because I work 3 weeks and then I have 3 weeks off. So you've got
Hmm.
half the year off right off the bat. Granted, you're sacrificing half of it being gone. But I'm like, I've told him, I was like, dude, at 18 years old, if you start up there and oh, I think my AirPod died. I was like, if you're there at 18 years old and buy a rental property, one rental property every year for 10 years, you just be disciplined right off the bat. So that way you've got 10 rental properties by the time you're 28 years old. Dude, you're done. You're done. You've got it. You've got it made. You can, if you want to go be a greeter at Walmart, you can be a greeter at Walmart, whatever you want to do. But you've got 10 rentals of passive income paying you and 10 appreciating assets. You can loan against them if you want. You can pull equity out. You can sell them if you need to, but hopefully not. Like, because the sale is one-time payment. Rental pays you every month for the rest of your life.
Don't have 10
So,
kids with 10 baby mamas either.
right. Yeah, exactly. But like fight the idea of having the new truck and the
Yeah,
toys and the things, like fight that idea
the
of,
shiny objects.
right, fight those things and get in early, be disciplined, get yourself established like that. And then think about it. You're 28 years old with all of this passive income and 10 rental properties. Like, think of your value as a man, what you have to offer, as far as like in a relationship wise, like everything, like the things that you're going to learn as far as like the handyman side of things, fixing things up and being able to fix things around the
In,
house,
out, taxes,
right?
assets,
All of it,
write
you know?
off, you business, real life
Right.
business.
Right. And these are
Why,
the
hey,
things
why
that
aren't
are
they
going to,
fucking teaching real estate in high school? Why can't you? You can come out with your fucking cosmetology license. Why can't kids come out with a fucking real estate license
um,
or a trading license for to
right.
trade
Well,
stocks
because
and
they want
shit?
to keep you, because that's not feeding
Because it
their
doesn't.
best
Yeah,
interest.
like a
Yeah.
copier that never breaks is not a fucking good copier. It's not a good
Right.
business model.
Yeah, they just, like
Got to be the Bob Marley copier, always jamming.
right. Have you ever heard of Robert Kiyosaki? He wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad.
I've heard.
He
Yeah,
wrote a lot of books, but he, like that man's a very, his mindset is a great mindset to carry, but it's, you know, they don't teach financial literacy in school because I don't think teachers would be teachers if they taught financial literacy because none of it really makes sense. Like the money
yeah,
that's spent to be a teacher for what the payment is and
yeah,
everything else. Like they keep teachers, and this is no disrespect towards anybody out there that's a teacher. Like I'm not saying this in any way, but like they pay them a certain amount to keep them in a certain place to keep them doing what they're doing. And granted, there is the joy of teaching and the fulfillment that comes from that, and I will never take away from that because I know that how that feeds your soul. But there's reasons why they don't teach these things in school because like it won't feed the machine in the way that they need it to be fed. So um,
yeah. When somebody asked me, they were like where I live in this small town, we have a family run grocery business that's been here forever. And there's people that talk about wanting a Trader Joe's, wanting a this and wanting a that. And I go, look, no, the people who control this area, they keep the money between them. They sit on the Chamber of Commerce. They approve what's allowed in and what's allowed out. They approve the permitting.
right,
They would rather give this person who owns Chick-fil-A a third Chick-fil-A in another location that we don't need, as opposed to give somebody new something
right,
new that people actually want.
yeah.
It
Well,
they keep it between them, and I mean that's just the way the world works. I mean, and on different levels, you
right,
know?
absolutely. Everybody's scratching each other's back. The only way to do that is just to get on the board.
Yeah.
Beat them at their own game. If that's what you want to do, then you need to be get at like that was it's I because I did the exact same thing in my town where I'm at here. The board here, they're very constrictive in certain aspects and everything. And I was like, all right, well then I'm gonna get on the board. I'm gonna get in there and I'm gonna put my input in there and I'm gonna change it. My ex and I were the first Airbnb owners in our town. And
Whoa.
when we went to the planning committee and everything, they were against it pretty hardcore. And, like through what we were able to like explain, they opened it up to us and they were at first they're like, well, then that means we got to have rules and blah, blah, blah. So they came up with this very restrictive set of rules, but they didn't know what they were doing in their defense. They had no idea how to promote or sorry, approach this entire situation. So they're like, well, you can only have two people per bedroom stay in your Airbnb. And we had two one-bedroom apartments in a commercial building that we owned. And I was like, okay, like I understand what you're saying to try to keep parties out and stuff like that, but you just removed every young couple with a child from staying in my Airbnb.
That's what I just thought. Like nobody's gonna be like a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old.
Right, exactly. And so they're, well, that's okay. You can do that. I was like, no, you're not understanding that. I have to follow what you put in black and white. So when you put that in there, yeah, right now we may think, oh yeah, it's okay because we're having this conversation. But when it comes down to it, I would be breaking the law by having a young couple with an infant in my Airbnb. And so like they respected that. They were really good about it. We had the conversation and everything, and then they actually invited us back a year later to review the policies that they had in place and kind of like help them structure it a little bit differently. And they did. They ended up going by zones. So it's like if it's zoned residential, then you're under these rules. If it's zoned commercial or dual use, it's under this. If it's zoned this, then it's under this, which I think is a better way to go about it in the grand scheme of things. But um I think that yeah, there's a lot of pop people in power that keep things the way they are for their own self-interest, but the only way to do you can either A, complain about it
Yeah.
and sit and play the victim, or B, you can take a proactive approach and you can, get yourself in a position to be able to change things. And it's just I'm much more I don't look for problems, I look for solutions. And
Yeah.
so, I'll find a way. If that's how you want it to be, okay, then you'll see me at the next meeting sitting next to you.
And
Like
so
instead
I,
of
I I guess you're happy enough with whatever they're teaching Landon at school, but it sounds to me like too like you're definitely the type of parent who you're going to ensure he knows what's important, what's not, what to regard and what to disregard. Like,
yeah. Focus
at
on what you can control, let go of the rest, and it's really important to think outside the box. Just because people tell you things doesn't necessarily mean that that's what it is or that's the truth. Like, we're told that the sky is blue, so we all think the sky is blue. Granted, that's what it is, but like, and that's a generalized statement in the sense of like, just because that's what everybody says or everybody does or anything doesn't mean that it's the right way or the only way, and there's always a way around it. So, like, be creative, think about things, find a problem and fix it, or find a way around something. Like, don't just take no for an answer. And I don't mean that in any sense of disrespect. Um, I just mean that in a sense of, be creative and think outside of what people are saying or doing.
Yeah,
Don't be a
because
sheep.
I think there's kind of like some trickery. There's a fine line to I guess telling your kids like, hey, like your teachers are your teachers, but they're still human. Where I think maybe in my like to still be respectful, but don't believe everything they say. They're just fucking
Right,
people.
right.
They don't know
Yep.
everything.
No. Well, so actually, he got in trouble last year at school for calling a teacher a liar. And so he, like, the whole way it went was, he comes home, same thing, Dad, we gotta have a talk. Okay, like, what is it, bud? He's like, well, I got 3 lunch detentions for telling my teacher that she's a liar. And so I'm like, well, did she lie? Yes. So now I'm all of a sudden like I'm on like his side, like, oh, dude, like bullshit. Like I'm about to call the school and we're gonna have a little bit of a conversation here, not out of like anger or anything like that, but and so I'm like, well, like, tell what happened? What went down? And he was like, well, there's these kid in my class that they were like, they're kind of like troublesome kids and they've been acting out and all this. And this their counselor had came into the class and just asked like how they were doing. And the teacher was like, oh, they've been great and whatever, like saying how good they've been. And Landon just spoke up and said, well, that's a lie. And I was like, all right, fair enough. Like, I mean, it is, but so like I'm hearing this, and as we're going through the conversation more, he starts opening up about how him and that teacher don't get along already, and how things are like, oh yeah, she's always this and this, and I was like, oh dude, I was like, listen to me, dude, that's where you went wrong. And he was like, what? I was like, I will not punish you for calling her a liar and calling her out because I think that that's absolutely the way that things should go. But you went into this locked and loaded. You were waiting for a moment to pounce. Like you wanted to be able to like call her out or to get your jab in or whatever it is that you want to say. And I
To
was
be
like, and
right.
right. I said, that's where you went wrong. I was like, you're not controlling your emotions well. You're allowing that to get the best of you. That's where you're in trouble. I was like, now I don't think that it was disrespectful in a sense to call her out because if she's lying, then you need to, in my opinion, people need to be called out on that sort of thing. I said, but I was like, I'm not going to punish you at home. You got your punishment at school. You're going to take that punishment just fine, but understand in the future, like that's what it was. And with that, you've got to call your mom and you've got to tell your mom because as a co-parent, that's like I would be upset if I didn't know about something like that.
Yeah.
full well knowing what he's about to embark on with having to talk to his mother. So he calls
Uh,
her and she's a great mom. I don't want to I'm not like we parent things very differently. Some of us can let things go. Some of us choose to beat a pile of dead horses.
some
And
things are like what how things look versus what how things really are. What's
right.
what?
Yeah, and so he had to call his mom and after about a 20-minute conversation of hearing the same thing over and over and over. Like, he gets off the phone. I'm like, all right, bro, how was that? And he's like, oh, well, there you go. Hey, don't do that, and you won't have to worry about it. But that was like a lesson that I had with him. Also, was like, dude, it's not always what you're saying or what you're doing, but it's the intent behind it.
Yeah.
And you have to like being able to control your emotions is something that's so important and not really taught. And in many aspects of parenting. I mean, when we were kids, like you would remember like teenage boys, like the amount of aggression that they would show, like in sports, let's
Yeah.
say, like when you miss a catch in football, like this huge like outburst, like people think that that's like at that age, that's
Normal.
cool or accepted or
Hmm.
funny or cool, like or there's like power in that, and it's not.
Oh, because it's
And
geared towards excellence. He's just
right.
so mad because he's not so excellent.
Right. And I'm not saying that like competition is bad or like I believe sports are good. I'm not into it, but whatever. But I just we perceive things as like that's like a sign of power or strength, and it's not. That
Yeah,
might
it's
hear
still
bug
an
back,
it's still an outburst.
What's
No,
that?
it's still an outburst no matter how how you slice it. And and sometimes I have to explain or I have to apologize quite a bit because I'm OCD, I'm a perfectionist, I'm a people
Yeah.
pleaser, and that will cause me to act certain ways when I step out of alignment, I'm not in full control. Um, and I know that, but I've it's taken me a long time become aware of that and to understand that. And I wish I wish I'd had parents that kind of helped me be aware of that earlier, or at least to help explain that, hey, you have some things that are can be superpowers, but can also be your biggest kryptonite if you let it.
As parents, I think everybody, for the most part, is only parenting as good as what they're able to with what they have offer, what they have as knowledge and growth and everything, right? And so as we go and grow as people through our own, growth and development, like we have to look back and understand, like they did the best that they could. This is their
Yeah.
first time doing it too.
Mm-hmm.
Like they've never done that before. That was their first rodeo. And so it's easy for us to look back and be like, oh, well, this should have been done different or this should have been done, but they didn't know what the hell was going on at that time. They didn't know what was they didn't have TikTok and Instagram reels where you can actually learn the psychology behind certain things or anything like that. So they really were winging it just like we are. And so it's like us as adults and parents have to like take ownership in that sense that like we are going to take the time to like invest in our children in the sense of really making sure that these things aren't carried on and teaching that and like I said earlier, like it's so important. Kids are smart, man. Kids are so smart, and whether you want to give them credit for it or not, like they're like sponges, and they see it, they hear it, everything that's said and done, all of it. And you've got to live your advice. Like that's the most important thing. You've got to live what you're saying and not just say it. My parents were the type that it was like, do it because I said so.
Yeah.
Like not because that's how
Do
they're
as I
living.
say, not as I do. And
Right, right,
when I always say like end of July will be 2 years that I've been podcasting, and this will be episode 123, and it's like, why have I not quit? Well, because my daughter was the one that suggested I start a podcast. What am I
right,
showing her if
right.
I quit? Has nothing I could tell her, I could come up with an excuse. Well, daddy's got to do this and daddy doesn't have the time. Daddy doesn't really want to. No, what am I showing her? And, there's one day she can go back and listen and understand when she's ready to hear. But at this stage in life, they do what they see. They emulate what they see, not what
Yep.
they hear. And part
Yeah.
of that, part of being able to do this, like for you and Landon, is that legacy piece of it, is that, working 6 years in a trauma center taught me that life is very precious. It can be chicken today, feathers tomorrow. And should one of us meet our untimely demise, um, our children, our grandchildren will know what we were about, what we stood for, what we thought was important,
Yep.
why we thought it was important. And, you know, I've seen my great grandparents in pictures, but I've never heard them. Um, and so this is kind of this opportunity is a timestamp
Right.
for children and grandchildren, and to know a little bit about the history of your family and put things into context of how the world is at this time and why. Because we had the women's thing and they reached here, and we thought that strong economy, taking love out of everything was the answer, but you kind of get back with the hippie woo woo stuff, and you learn at the end of the day, regardless, we're all subject to the same ending, regardless of how
Right.
much money you have or what tax bracket you're in. You all get the same ending.
Yeah.
None of us know anything about it. And so that's what gives us fear. But, essentially at the end of the day, um, whether you're sitting in a prison cell or you're Jeff Bezos with all the money and everything in the world, I mean, I think people just want to love and be loved. And, so to me, it's like I would say go out and be the person that you want to meet, you
Dude,
know?
we are put on this planet to experience life. We are, and our own experience is uniquely our own and nobody else's. So, like anybody else's opinion is it doesn't matter. Like what you think is important doesn't have to be what I think is important, whether it be money or a house or whatever it is. I could honestly say that I could willingly be homeless and be okay with it.
I say that all the time because I
I
don't
could
need
I could
much.
I don't need if I have my camera, I am like 100% completely content. I don't
You
need
could
anything.
hustle for what is it, the Planet Fitness, where you could get a shower. You got the
Yep,
library for books
yep. You don't need yeah. A house to me is just a box that holds all your shit,
and all the
you know?
shit owns you.
And very much so. And so I had an uncle that passed away in 2021 uh out of nowhere. Well, I mean, he had very, very poor health, but like we didn't really see it coming. And at that time, it was right after my divorce, so I was cash heavy, and I told my grandmother, I said, "Hey, like I will buy everything. I'll buy the entire estate, and with that, I will take care of all of the hassle. You don't have to go through anything. You don't have to worry about anything. Like you just lost your son. The last thing you should have to do is go through all his shit and deal with that. Okay? Like, give me a number, I'll buy it, and I will take care of it all." So she did. I went to my family. I was like, "Hey, does anybody have any issues? Because if this is going to start any bullshit, like I won't do it, you know." But this is what it is. Everything was transparent. Everything was on the up and up. Everybody agreed it was okay. So anyway, I go in there and I'm cleaning out his house, and I mean, it took me months of like just going because when somebody like the realization that I had was the moment that you die, the second you die, every single thing that you own instantly becomes somebody else's problem. And now somebody has to go through every single thing that you own. If you've got a library of books, guess what? So you might have put $100 bill in one of those books. You might have stashed, 10 grand in something. You might have stashed, nobody knows. So,
I have handmade bookmarks that my daughter, her writing stuff to me is what are bookmarks through all my books.
right. So those things, like nobody will know that those are there unless every single thing is gone through. And so like the time and energy that it takes for people to go through every single thing that you own. And so then you start to look at everything that you own and you're like, I don't need this. And two, I don't want to leave this for somebody to have to fucking deal with. I used to have all of these like animal mounts as trophies, animals that I'd killed, fish that I've caught, stuff like that. And that was like my decor in my house and everything. And for years, from the time I was in high school till literally like 2 years ago, till I picked up a camera and started taking photos, that was my decor, was freaking dead animals
Now,
everywhere.
hey,
It's not
now if you
inviting.
can't shoot it one way, I shoot it another.
Right, exactly. And I'll tell you, I'd much rather shoot it with my camera these days.
Right?
But I had this stuff up there, and one day I just walked into my apartment. I was looking at all these dead animals, and I thought, these have been my decor since I was 18 years old. Like, this is all I've ever known. And I was like, and this is not inviting. This is not inspiring. And what am I going to do? Am I just going to carry these things around with me for the rest of my life? Like, no. I took them all off the wall. I sold the otter that I had mounted. The pheasants I threw in the trash. The fish I threw in the trash. Like all the deer antlers that I had. Like all of these, and I'm looking at them, and they all have memories. They all have like this moment and this part in my life that is important and everything. But I'm like, why am I keeping just like boxes and boxes and boxes of deer antlers? Like, what am I gonna do with them? Like, is this some sort of weird, like, ego filled, like trophy? Like I don't need it. So literally, like, and that even went into like me looking at hunting. It's like I see deer all the time where it's like, no, I don't want to shoot that one. Like I don't like I'm not gonna
Do
throw
I
that
need
the
it?
antlers. Right. I'm not gonna set that just into a whole box
Right.
like to add to the pile, and so it's my whole mindset really changed after having to go through my uncle's stuff. And it ended up being I didn't even like get rid of everything. So much of when I sold that house, it was to a young couple on they tried to a land contract and they weren't able to make it happen. But anyway, we did end up FHA and made it go through. But um, I knew the buyers very well intimately and stuff like that. And we had worked together on things and fixing up the house, getting it done the way that they wanted it and stuff and setting it up. And really it came down to there was like a whole garage, like riding lawnmower, rakes, shovels, like all of like the stuff that like is added stuff that you have to purchase over the years of being able to maintain a home. And it gets to like where I have to go and deal with all this shit. And I just was like, and it was a 3 hour drive up there, and it was just all this stuff. And finally, I just called them, and I was like, you know what? Like, you guys can have it all. I don't want to deal with it. Like, this is all going with the house. I don't want you guys to have to even worry about having to purchase all this stuff after you just bought a new house. Like, I've been in your shoes. You guys have a little boy. Like, the last thing that you should have to do is have to go spend 5 grand
Now I
total
need
on
a
all of
blower,
this
a
stuff.
this,
Right.
a that,
All
the
right. Oh, yeah.
other.
They literally walked into a house that came with everything they needed to run and maintain a house. And to me at the end of the day, to me also, I just thought like there's no other way that my uncle would have liked to have seen that go. He was the type not one to sell anything, but he would give it away before he'd sell it. And so I was like, this is a solid choice that'll kind of like do him justice and make that kind of go on. And but now I'm such a minimalist. I don't want for anything. I've got my bicycle to bike on. I've got my camera to take pictures, and my son. Like we're
Yeah.
good.
Well, and
That's
I
why I say
think
I
the
could be
travel
homeless.
too probably helps. The three there, three back.
Yep.
Um, I found it's like being in the military. You travel light, move fast, and so you kind of want for less. And my wife and I, when we were doing the 3.5 live-in caregiving thing, and when we moved back, just having gone through 3.5 months, 2 seasons, Christmas, a birthday, Thanksgiving, holidays, just how much shit you're able to collect. And you're like,
Oh man.
and this was like 3 months, and you're like, no, like I just want to get rid of stuff. And if I could get rid of it, if I don't need it to podcast or if it's not my guitar, you know, I, I I I love books and old bookstores and buying used books from the library and hard copies. But if I ever want to travel, I'm okay with Kindles because you don't need a
Yeah.
light. You don't need a
Yeah.
light to read them too.
Yeah.
But it saves on the space. But we just did this consignment sale. We do it twice a year and trying to clean out our storage. And it's like every time we do it, it's like I get more and more the urge of like, I just want less shit. I don't want a storage unit. We've had a storage
Right.
unit since we moved here 10 years ago. Like,
Right.
why do we need it? If we haven't used it in 6 months, I mean, our washer that broke and we had one in storage, shit like that. Yes. Save $400 or $500. Yes.
How much did you
But
pay for that storage unit over that time? You know, you could have bought for
exactly.
that money, you could have bought one. But
Exactly. But like
yeah,
clothes, like I mean, I've lost 64 pounds, like shit I wore 10 years ago, even if I can fit into it. I mean, I was actually heavier. I haven't been this weight in 20 years, but is it even the style? Even if I
right.
could
You're not gonna
wear
wear
it.
it anyway. Let it go.
Exactly. What the fuck?
Yeah.
I'm like, and so
I
I'm
went
kind
to
of to
my
that space.
I went to my storage unit a couple years ago, and I was like, it was like 6 at night. I had, like just smoked a little weed and had this huge like urge of like, I'm gonna get shit done. So I go to my storage unit and I'm like, I'm just gonna empty everything out, and then I'm gonna reorganize it, and whatever I want, and whatever I don't. I'm gonna just go through. I'm going through everything. So I get there, I empty everything out, and I look, and I'm like, holy shit, that's a lot of stuff. And so I like grabbed like a handful of things I knew I wanted to keep, and then things I knew I was going to sell. And then there's still a whole lot of stuff. And I looked at it and I was like, I don't have the energy for this.
I
Like
don't want any of it.
I looked at it. I was like, if I haven't opened this box in 5 years, it's gone. And I was just like, literally, I just threw everything in the back of my truck. I drove to a dumpster and I threw it all away. Like, I don't even know what was in it. Still to this day, don't know. And I really don't care because like if I didn't open it and didn't know, then why it's such like an emotional tie that we create out of our own like um
I
I don't
started
know if it's an insecurity or what, but
tattoos. So when I started getting tattoos, I've gotten about a tattoo everywhere I've lived, and they all remind me of something. Like when my wife and I, before we were husband and wife and just dating 6 years, she finished my sleeve. So I know my sleeve is always that 6 year anniversary present.
right,
Um, but it's a lot easier for me to carry.
right.
This is my daughter's, and um, but it's that stuff, and I know I just want less. I kind of want whatever will reduce down to, like I said, 3 years when my daughter is done. When she starts high school, I want to homeschool. I want the podcast to be in a place. I want her to be the producer, social media manager person. I want us to go around, interview interesting people, see interesting things, and live life. And if I need a steady 9 to 5 job, I'll take one when she's 18 and goes
Right.
and does whatever she ends
We
up
only get this
doing.
one life, man. Like there's no rewind button.
And this
There's
in
no
between, it's
do-overs,
almost like
nothing.
we need to do it backwards. Like they tell you, like you bust your ass while your kids are in school and you enjoy it when they're 60, and you buy the 5 bedrooms and then you get too old to maintain it and you sell it off. It's like, why not do the odd shit now that I'm doing,
Right.
be able to
Yep.
be
Live.
available and present with my daughter now? And if I really need some stability, wait till she's 18 and I can work 9 to 5 when she's got her own life and own child, and I don't
Right.
have to be there for her as much anymore. But
Yeah,
it's like now is the time, you know?
absolutely.
And
I
and
agree. Live your
and,
life.
and that's where I kind of was like, hey, whatever it is, you got to do it now. And so I started the podcast, and here we are going on 2 years
I
and
think it's awesome. I
working
think it's
on
so cool.
coaching. Um, I got some certifications and I'll be doing that, but it's really just getting people, helping them understand they can take the chance and just do their own thing, that there's
Yeah.
people like me, people like you. I mean, you figure out a way to make it work, but you align the things that are important to you, and you know, keep it
And I think that
simple.
it's really important to align that with the person that you choose to be with. I think that there's such a lost focus on finding a good partner that fits your life. You know, so many people fall into, oh, they're cute and they're fun
They
and we
think
just
they
have
need
such a good
somebody.
time together. Right, that too.
They're
Yeah,
uncomfortable
very
being
much that.
alone.
Yeah, I fucking love being alone. Like it will take a very special woman to be able to lock me down, but I know that the next woman that I choose to be with will be the one. And I'm not saying that there's only one person for me out there. I think it's somebody that dedicates the time and puts the reciprocal energy into like making something work.
If I'm in Utah,
Um,
it might be the two.
what's that?
I said if I'm
If
in
you're
Utah at the
in
time,
Utah,
it might
right?
be the
Yeah,
two. Happen to
right.
be the
Yeah,
one at the
exactly.
time.
It's yeah, I mean whatever works for you. That's I just think that it's like I was at a party years ago it was right after my divorce and there was so many couples that were arguing there. And it ended up being like 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm playing Dr. Phil with these people, like, explaining to them like, look, you guys, look at how you're treating each other. Genuinely. Like these are the people that you chose to spend the rest of your life with, and you're choosing to talk to them in this way. You're choosing to beat them down instead of build them up. You're choosing to do all of that. Like, what does that say?
That
Like,
doesn't add
why?
up.
Right. Like, what are you expecting to come of this? Like these alcohol fueled rages that you guys get into or whatever, maybe not even alcohol fueled, but whatever it is, like, there's so much spite and animosity between people in relationships these days, and then people will stay just out of like convenience or insecurity or discomfort or
Well,
the idea to
you
stay together
forget,
for their kids or
you
whatever it
forget
is.
that. I always say that people forget that there was a time when just being with the other person, that was the goal, that was the prize. When you're
Right,
just doing anything, being silent over a sunset, and you're like, I could be in this moment forever.
right.
That's if you can't have those moments, I think with nothing, but you have to remember that when it gets busy and all this stuff starts to own you and there's all these complications, that remember that that was the goal at the one point in time, that
Right.
this was the person that you would move heaven and earth for, relocate for, um, do whatever it took to be with. And that
Yeah.
just being with them moved you in such a way. I'm like,
Oh
remember
man.
that. Remember that
Yeah.
when you're at each other's throat.
Well, and you and I are in different places in life where it's, as a single guy, for
Uh
me
huh.
being out there in the dating world, and I talk to a lot of women and guys too about life and relationships and stuff, and it's like it surprises me how many um well, I'm going to say women only because of that's like been the majority of what I've talked to discover this. And I know that men are probably equally as much. I just don't engage with many with, new men in my life because I've got a core group of guys that I kind of like am
Right.
friends with. But um, how many of them will engage in a relationship with somebody knowing that they're a bad parent? Or the way or have a bad temper or what, like they'll just go and it's like, well, I never really liked the way that he was as a parent. I'm like, when you start before you even get to dating, that's like an interview process where you should be assessing like, okay, how are they going to fit in my life? How do they treat the waiter at the restaurant? How do they treat their parents? How do they treat their siblings? How do they treat, if they treat the people that they live with like shit, guess what? Before too long, you're going to be living with them and that's how they're going to treat
If
you.
something doesn't go their
You
way.
know? Right. And so it's like, and if they're not a good parent, if you don't like their parenting styles, like these are things that should all be addressed like very early on before you even get to the dating side of things, before you guys even sleep together. Like keep that as like the last. Everybody's so quick to jump in the sack. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
man, as soon as you do that, everything else becomes so much more difficult because you've crossed that line. Like if you just leave that out of it and you start to like learn this person for who they are, and then it's like if it's not there, it's not there. You should, as an adult, you just walk away from it. Like, hey, you know what? Like you're a great person in your own respect for this, but you know what? Like I just don't think that you're what I'm looking for in a long-term partner. And as adults, if you're healed or at least on this path, like you'll understand that you know what? It has to be a two-way street. And if it's not there, it's not there. And you're able to amicably like walk away. It doesn't have to be this huge blow up of an argument where you're blocking each other and there's all this anger and animosity towards each other towards the end. Like, hey, oh, look, we're adults. Like, you know what? I wish you nothing but the best in finding your own person, but like you're just not for me. for this reason, this reason, or this reason, or whatever it is,
It'd be like
you
if you
know?
could avoid seeing a train collision 2 months down the road, wouldn't
Right.
you?
Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
You would
it's
take
like,
every step to make sure that you don't stand on the tracks in front of that train.
yeah, especially if you could see it that far. But the thing is I think, I don't know, maybe people wanna people wanna ignore the awareness part of it. People just either they're not aware or they want to ignore the awareness of it. I mean, there's a lot of job scams out there right now, and because I do odd jobs, I get a lot of odd job scams, and it's like anything else. People want to believe that there's an easier way, a faster way, and you see it, especially as somebody who does podcasting and or coaching online. It's like, man, to find anyone who's truthful, valid, let's say not on PEDs or not photoshopped or whatever,
Hmm.
is just difficult. And so,
Well, the truthful and honest part is like such a big thing because that's where it's an issue these days. Is there's so many people that are carrying on like this false reality of what their life is and how they want somebody to receive them when it's not even who they really are.
yeah,
And so they're, they come across as like not being their genuine self right off the bat. And like for me, like that's the only way to go about it is truthful, honest, and genuine. And it's like when I show up with my fanny pack and my flip flops, and people are like, "You wear a fanny pack?" Like, fuck yeah, it's so convenient. You can't
yeah,
argue the convenience of it. That's all. And it's just like I don't care what people think of me. Like that's your opinion of me is none of my business. And so if somebody doesn't like that, that's okay. I respect you for that. Like I don't not angry at you at all. But it goes with relationships also. And I've met a lot of really great women in the time that I've been single, not even like on a intimate sense. I'm talking just meeting them in general and understanding that they're just not for me. And or vice versa, that I'm just not for them. And I've had to like eat that one, like one side might really feel like, oh my gosh, like the connection was totally there. There was this, and then you get a call or a text the next day where the other side felt completely opposite. And you're like, damn, and yeah, it's a little bit of an ego hit, and you're bummed, but like at the end of the day, what are you gonna do? Beg somebody to be in your life?
mm,
What kind of relationship are you gonna like cultivate with starting with that? Or like it's I don't know. I think like you said, it starts with the idea of having to be comfortable being alone and okay with that and loving yourself and
and
like being okay
understanding
with
that
yourself.
you want to be like, you know, the situations I go into, I hope I can be a value add, but also the people I allow into my circle,
Right. Yeah.
virtually or reality, I hope that they're a value add. That's why
Right.
you're in my circle. And I hope to be able to add value to you somehow. And so and if not, then I don't need anything. I grew up an only child. I'm perfectly happy being alone. And sometimes the scary part is I'm so comfortable being alone that I can forget that I need connection in order
Yeah.
to experience the love I have both to receive, but also the love I have to give, um, to the world as a person who's always been of service and done service, as an occupation. And so I have to forget that, I can be too comfortable alone, that I can forget that I need that connection sometimes. And that's always a
I
challenge, I
lost you
think.
on the audio.
Oh, can you hear me now? Maybe it's just the AirPods.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can
Yep,
hear you.
I can hear you. There we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, probably
Yeah,
just the
probably just
AirPods.
yeah. Sorry.
No, no worries. But yeah, so anyway, I'm gonna let you go.
Yeah,
It was a great talking to you.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I had
I
a
hope you
lot of
got some good
fun.
content.
Oh, no doubt. This is exactly up my alley, what I'm about. Think what the listeners are about, and you know, ho- hopefully you had a good time, and
Oh yeah,
as long as you were being authentic, and that's all that matters. And um, I think there's a lot that can be learned and stuff that a lot of people could take. And being a single dad out there, a lot of people always think, hey, single mom, hey, there's a lot of single dads out there too. And think about what you want to be passing down to your son or daughter. And I think you offered a great example with that.
good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really genuinely take that role intimately serious. You know, that's like something that is just so. I want to be the person that my son sees. You know, like that's like a big deal. Like that he thinks that I am. I want to be that, and um, I think it's important to carry that sort of value and what you the actions that you show them. You know, like I'll say this really quick. Like I saw this. I shared it on Facebook and stuff the other day. I think you might have actually seen it, but it's this guy Corey. I can't remember his last name, but he says that the examples that we set, you know, and he's like he says he's got his son on his counter, and he said, you know, the examples that we set, and he sets a case of beer up there. And he's like, we show them that this is how you celebrate, and another one, and this is how you become happy, and this is how you spend time with your friends, and this is how you handle time alone, and this is how you handle the difficult times, and he keeps adding more alcohol on the table, you
Oh,
know, and he's like, and he's like, it's not necessarily that we're handing them a drink, but we're handing them an example of how to live life. And it's like, so when times are hard, you drink. When it's time to celebrate, you drink. When it's time to do this, you drink. And so it's like, it's those messages that are sent to them. And it's like, I think that if people had that sort of mindset across all aspects of parenting, not just the drinking, but like the examples that you're showing them, how to handle breakups, how to handle dating, how to handle, you know, healing and growth and all of these things. And like make sure that they know these things, like show them the examples of what it is through your life and not just, you know, what our parents showed us or
yeah.
what we think is easy for us or what, you know, what our friends are doing or whatever it is. So I think that that's like just that one really hit home for me because I just think that it's um I know that I didn't want my son looking at me as somebody that drank all the time as the way to live life, you know.
Well, and the other part is I think even just you taking the opportunity and being vocal, being vulnerable enough to be open enough to share that,
Yeah.
and that's your thoughts on it. Because I think that's probably, the stigma. We didn't have it, I think, probably from our fathers, and the stigma's not there for no reason. And the stereotype. So, I think that's like a bold choice, first of all, and uh, teaching them a lot. And, but not just that, it's teaching other fathers out there and people who are going to become fathers. Um, and that's kind of the goal
Yeah, absolutely.
is like, hey, what's his story and what can I learn from him? And man, if we approached every other human that way, could you imagine what the world could be? How good it could be is like we
Yeah,
wouldn't fight over shit. We'd be like, "Hey man, what's your story and what can I learn from you? What can I
right.
take from you and incorporate into how I'm going to parent my daughter today? What's one good little piece of advice, you know?"
Yeah, I wrote a book for my kids. Well, I didn't write it. I put it together. In 2019, I sent them a text to like 86 people that were in my contacts that I worked with or knew throughout life or whatever that had played a large role in my life, like that were impacted me in such a way. And it was a long text, but it was basically just saying like, hey, you know, like you've been such a part of my life and it impacted me in such a way that I want you to have an impact on my child's life. And so could you give me any sort of life advice? I said, I'm not going to give an example because I don't want to influence your response. But like, could be something that told you, something that you wish somebody told you, something that you tell people, whatever it is, could you give some life advice? And I was like, I'm just gonna like put something together for them to carry with them throughout life, to always have. And so I sent it off and I got about 50% response, so out of the 80 something, I think I got about 40 people that responded. And some were as quick and simple as like one statement, like chase Jesus, leave yourself behind. That was the first one that came back from a friend of mine from high school. Like, okay. And I didn't make any grammatical errors. I didn't make anything. I just literally copied and pasted into a note and saved, and some were 2 pages long of like bullet point things. Some were just like stories. Some were, what it was. And there was just all of these things. And I just ended up putting a book together. And so I had the advice, the person's name, and their occupation. And I wanted my kids to know that you can get advice from anybody. Doesn't matter what their walk of life is. Everybody has value to add in some aspect. And so I have this book I gave it one to my son, one to my daughter, and I gave them this, and so they would have that forever. And it's just like the book of life advice. And I think it's so great. I actually read through it and reflect on a lot of those things all to this day still. And there's things that didn't make sense to me, 4 years ago that I look back at now and I'm like, damn, like, yep, that one nailed it. There it was right there. So like, I mean, it's even something that I'm even able to grow from. And I'm at the point now where I've been toying with the idea of doing it again. Like it's been 5 years since I've given them one. Like I think I would like to do like do it, maybe put it on Facebook and put it out there. Like, hey guys, like message me if you have something, whatever.
That is
Like
a
just
great idea.
anything. And just maybe I'll just kind of continue to do that because it's something that they can, and it's a book. Like I glued and bound the thing with thread and glue and made, the whole book and everything. And it's like,
Because we didn't have 5 years ago, AI wasn't the thing it was today. And
right.
so perspectives change, but I love that you were like, hey, there's people of all occupations, all walks of life. They
Yeah.
all have advice and something to offer.
Right.
you know
Yeah.
and but the idea, hey, too, you introduce AI into the world, how does that change? How does it change the same person, but then how does somebody new look at it? Because you have thought leaders, thought disruptors, innovators, all
Right.
that. And so, yeah, that's interesting. But hey, considering on that, um, man, that's how I end all my podcasts. We'll leave it
All
with a
right.
thought, which is, I always say, go out and be the person that you want to meet.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. I'll talk to you
All right.
later.
Have a good one.
All right, later.
Bye.
Well, you've made it this far, which means you're probably a super fan of the show. That's amazing, and I really appreciate your support. To keep up with all the latest updates, make sure you're following the show on social media. You can find all the links in the bio. And if you've been enjoying the content, I'd be so grateful if you could take a minute and leave a review. It really helps us reach more people who might love the show as much as you do. Also, don't forget to tell one friend about the show as well. Word of mouth is the best way to help us grow. And if you're feeling extra generous, check out the link tree in the bio where you can find a link to donate. Every little bit helps me keep creating the content you love. Thanks for being an awesome superfan. I couldn't do it without you.
Asteroid of fear.